Chapter 326, Part 1. I really saw you right. Turning around, a slender old man wearing a black suit and a top hat appeared in front of Chen Luo. He clapped his hands gently, and the other person's face was filled with a smile, and he nodded with satisfaction. He looked at Chen Luo as if he was sizing up a collection. Mephisto. When he saw the person coming, although he had never seen him before, Chen Luo called out the person's name with determination. That's right. Mephisto nodded and admitted without hesitation, and slowly stepped forward towards Chen Luo. It looks like what I thought. You really succeeded. Now you have truly metamorphosis into a demigod-level creature. Coming to Chen Luo, looking up and down, a hint of admiration gradually appeared on Mephisto's face. To be honest, I really didn't expect you to actually succeed. In all these years, you are still the first human being from the 580 that I have seen who can withstand the burning fire of hell. Oh no, you should be a vampire. I have to say, I am really impressed by you. You should have received the meeting gift I gave you just now, right? Now, it's time for you to repay him. Repay? The corners of Chen Luo's mouth slowly curved, and he looked straight at the other person. The violent energy in his body continued to surge, and then poured into his right hand instantly. Definitely. Then now, let me repay you. Just as the last word fell, the next moment, Chen Luo punched fiercely. The surface of his right fist was covered with a rich bloodlight, and a long blood-colored thread was pulled out in the air. His fist was like a burning meteor, slamming forward. Boom. Before the fist approached, with the blessing of this blood god power, Chen Luo's punch suddenly exploded with unimaginable power. Compared with himself before metamorphosis, the power he exploded at this time was even stronger, more than 10 times. It has to be said that even if the blood god power is not good at blessing power, the power it unleashed at this moment was somewhat beyond Chen Luo's expectations. The moment the fist came into contact with the air turned into transparent folds under the strong pressure of the fist, and then was instantly penetrated by this fierce and violent punch. Circles of white air waves are continuously generated and spread from the surface of the fist, accompanied by a thunderous sound. Before the fist really touches the opponent's body, the violent fist wind blows the top hat on the opponent's head into the sky. At the same time, Mephisto's face was also dented by the strong wind, but even so, facing Chen Luo's punch, the opponent had no intention of dodging. He just stood there and took it directly. Chen Luo's fist was as heavy as a mountain. Boom. There was a terrifying sound, and a punch hit the opponent's front door. But what was different from Chen Luo's expectation was that after receiving his punch from the front, Mephisto still stood here motionless, without taking a step back. There was no scar on his face. He slowly pushed away Chen Luo's fist and waved gently. The next moment, the hat that had disappeared appeared in his hand, and he casually put it on his head. Looking at Chen Luo, Mephisto shook his head slightly, smiled and said, "You look angry. But that's understandable. This punch should be regarded as my apology to you. But it's only this time." Speaking of this, the smile on Mephisto's face disappeared, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. At the same time, on him, a terrifying aura that Chen Luo had never felt before suddenly rose into the sky, filling the entire world. The entire space that Chen Luo was in seemed to be frozen at this moment, and the air was stagnant like a substance. At the same time, Chen Luo's back felt like a big mountain was pressing on him, and cracks appeared under his feet instantly, and he could not even move a step. It seems difficult. Okay, now that you have succeeded, let me transform you into a demon next. In return, from today on, you will serve me forever and ever. Feeling the heavy pressure coming from his body, Chen Luo's expression changed. Then, as his mind turned, Chen Luo exploded with all his strength without any hesitation. The blood god power suddenly burst out from the body, and in an instant, the sky was suddenly shrouded in a bloody light that covered the sky and the sun. A blood cloud that was thousands of miles long emerged from the sky, then gradually turned into a semicircle and slowly fell towards the ground. The area of thousands of miles with Chen Luo, as the center had turned into a bloody barrier at this moment. Then, at Chen Luo's feet, a bloody barrier quickly spread to the surroundings, combining with the distant barrier. As the two interacted, a blood-colored wave surged on the ground, and then formed a huge tsunami that was as large as 1,000 meters, roaring and sweeping towards Chen Luo's direction. It seems like you really don't want to give up. Seeing this scene, Mephisto's face was calm, and his body slowly floated into the air. Then, a black mist as black as ink surged out of his body and spread to the surroundings. Then let me show you the gap between demigods and gods. When you recognize the reality, you will know that you have no other choice but to serve me. You talk a lot of nonsense. Facing his words, Chen Luo sneered disdainfully, swayed, and disappeared instantly. I want to see what kind of strength the so-called gods have. If you can't kill me today, sooner or later, I will cut off your old guy's head and play it with a ball. It just so happens that I still lack a god's head as a decoration in my house. I think you are quite suitable." Along with these words, a wave of blood surged around, roaring and sweeping towards Mephisto in the sky. Mephisto's face suddenly darkened, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and the murderous intent in his body rose uncontrollably. In an instant, the black mist spread rapidly outward. "Ant, you have to understand who you are fighting against now. No one can disobey God. Now, you will pay for what you said." As soon as the words fell, the next moment, the black mist spread instantly and turned into a black wave that stretched for thousands of miles, violently suppressing the huge bloody wave below. The sky was instantly filled with black and red, and it looked spectacular. A moment later, in this huge amount of blood-red enchantment, accompanied by an unprecedented terrifying loud noise, the blood color began to dissipate at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally returned to nothingness. Boom! A figure violently smashed into the air behind it, spanning thousands of meters in the blink of an eye, and crashed straight into a volcano with lava flowing behind it, instantly knocking it out of a huge amount of potholes. Inside the kilometer-high magma, in the magma lake that has been active for who knows how many years, as the energy continues to flow to the bottom of the 5.7 lake, gradually, the red magma gradually begins to cool down, and the last piece of dark brown rock. Boom! Countless rubble exploded, and Chen Luo's figure suddenly rose into the sky from the bottom, with its wings stretched out behind it, floating above the crater. Looking at the pitch-black mist above, Chen Luo spat out the blood foam from the corner of his mouth, and then pointed his middle finger at the sky. "Old guy, you have some skills. I won't play with you this time. Let's see you next time. Until then, I want to try and kill a god with my own hands. How does it feel?" After saying this, without waiting for the other party's reply, Chen Luo made a move and immediately chose to use the system reward he had just received. Directed transmission started. Please select a destination. Earth. The destination has been determined. The transmission begins. Then, under Mephisto's gaze, Chen Luo disappeared in an instant. Chapter 327, Part 1. No. Deafening roars resounded throughout the hell. In the dusk-like sky, endless black clouds covered the sky, rendering huge amounts of shadow for millions of miles around. The ground covered with magma began to shake violently, and the earth roared. Then countless cracks emerged from the ground and spread to the surroundings. The earth slowly cracked, and in just a short moment, thousands of huge amounts of rift valleys were opened on the ground, and it was impossible to see the bottom at a glance. Along with the shaking of the ground, the volcanoes scattered throughout this hell also began to shake violently. The crimson magma rose into the sky, straight up to 1,000 meters in the air, and then fell powerlessly downwards. Countless magma fell back to the ground, and the ground was instantly dyed red. The volcanic rocks emitting violent high temperatures flew around and splashed, and then smashed countless huge amounts of deep pits on the ground, and the area was then flowed out. The magma quickly covered it. In just a short moment, in this vast land with a radius of millions of miles, a huge magma ocean unprecedented in 05 slowly emerged, and was rendered into a deep red color under the reflection of the black clouds in the sky. Countless white gases exuding the smell of sulfur floated upward and gathered above the ocean, covering it with a thick layer of white mist. Looking down through the mist, in the ocean of magma, countless demon corpses are slowly floating above. Their flesh and blood are all corroded by the high temperature of the magma. All that is left is a pale skeleton. All living things are extinct, and there is a doomsday scene. Not long after, in the center of the black cloud, a figure slowly descended from it, floating 100 meters above the sea of magma. His face was extremely ugly, and a trace of violent murderous intent flashed in his eyes. "I'll find you, vampire. You can't escape. Your soul will belong to me sooner or later." On the other side, after using the directional teleportation rewarded by the system, Chen Luo felt his eyes flicker. When he came to his senses again, the scenery in front of him changed instantly. He lowered his head and looked at the land under his feet, then raised his head and looked around. Looking at the blue sky above his head and the fresh air around him, Chen Luo slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Finally home. Recalling the battle in hell just now, Chen Luo couldn't help but sigh secretly. It's true that he is a strong man at the level of a god. With my current strength, I still can't deal with it. If he hadn't left in time, maybe he would have been left in hell. It seems that we can only kill that old guy until we truly become a god. However, Chen Luo doesn't have a clue how to transcend demigods and become a real god. Maybe the system will give him some hints at some point in the future, but that is what happened later. Now he has just become a demigod, and there is still a long way to go before reaching the peak of demigods. Maybe when he truly grows to that point, everything will fall into place. Just when he was thinking this, Chen Luo's expression suddenly changed. He didn't know what he was feeling, and subconsciously turned his head to look somewhere in the sky. What sound? After a while, he finally saw clearly the thing in the sky. A whistling sound pierced the air, and there was lightning and thunder in the sky, accompanied by a long lightning across the sky. Then, a short hammer with a spiral airflow wrapped around its entire body, and a faint flash of lightning on the surface fell from the sky, heading straight towards Chen Luo where he is. Where did the hammer come from? Go back a few hours. Located in the center of Asgard, the interior of the magnificent palace, accompanied by the cheers of countless people, in the palace hall, a tall and muscular man, wearing a suit of armor, a silver helmet on his head, and a long red cloak on his back, holding a short hammer in his hand, was looking around with a happy face. Listening to the cheers coming from all around, his face was filled with the color of Zhozhongman. Thor. Well done. Welcome home, Your Highness Thor. Countless eyes were focused on the man in front of him who was walking towards the throne in front of him, his eyes full of excitement and admiration. Waves of cheers rang out, and Thor walked in the passage composed of guards wearing golden armor on the left and right, raising his arms high, listening to the cheers coming from all around, with his head held high and his face full of pride. Finally, when Thor walked through the passage and came under the throne, he knelt on one knee, took off his helmet, revealing his long hair that was as dazzling as gold, and looked around with a smile on his face. Boom. Finally, the man on the throne slowly stood up, wearing armor that was the same as Thor's, but the color was a more noble golden yellow. He wore a golden helmet, and his face looked vaguely old, but it revealed an aura of age. The vast kingly aura makes people feel sad just by looking at it from a distance. He is the true master of this royal palace and even this land called Asgard, the legendary eternal kingdom on Earth. He is in existence on the same level as the Ancient One, Mephisto and others, a true level godfather, a powerful man, and a divine craftsman. The eternal spear in his hand fell heavily, making a dull sound. Following this sound, the cheers fell silent instantly, and all the Asgard people gathered in the hall lowered their heads to show respect for the God King. Thor Odinson, my heir. Finally, Odin looked at the figure below and spoke slowly. My eldest son, Mjolnir has been in your hands for a long time. This hammer is forged from the core of a dying fixed star. Its power is unmatched. It is a weapon used to destroy, and it can also be called a tool for forging 497, befitting a king. As soon as these words came out, at this moment, next to Thor, a thin, slender man wearing green armor and a handsome face suddenly flashed a haze in his eyes, but it soon disappeared. I have been protecting Asgard and the innocent creatures in the Nine Kingdoms since the beginning of time. But it's all coming to an end. Having said this, Odin looked down. A glimmer of expectation quietly flashed through his majestic one eye, and his solemn voice resounded throughout the hall. Thor, do you swear to defend the Nine Kingdoms? I swear. Thor replied seriously under the throne. Do you swear to keep the peace? I swear. Do you swear to abandon all selfish ambitions and only do things that are beneficial to the kingdom? The voice became louder and louder. Facing Odin's question, Thor raised Mjolnir in his hand and shouted loudly, I swear. Nodding imperceptibly, Odin continued, so today, I, the father of God, Odin, announce this. There was a hint of excitement on Thor's face, and a smile appeared on his face, waiting for his father to make the final announcement. However, at this moment, Odin seemed to feel something. His tone paused, his eyes looked into the distance, and his face gradually became serious. Giants of Jotunheim. Chapter 328, Part 1. Upon hearing this, Thor was stunned for a moment, and then anger surged in his heart. He immediately stood up, held Mjolnir in his hand, looked at the figure on the throne, and said loudly, Father, where are they now? Trespassing into Asgard. I want those giants of Jotunheim to know that they need to pay for it. Faced with Thor's words, Odin seemed not to hear, strode down the steps, and then walked forward. Seeing this, Thor quickly followed him without any hesitation. In addition, beside Thor, the man wearing green armor also followed closely. Soon, when the three of them came to a secret room below the hall and looked at the door in front, Thor paused and subconsciously said, Treasure house? What are those giants of Jotunheim doing here? They want to retrieve a treasure passed down from generation to generation by the giants of Jotunheim, the casket of ancient winters. Odin pushed open the door without looking back. Then the three of them came to the interior of the treasure house and walked through the long corridor. Thor's face was full of fighting spirit, looking around, ready to take action at any time. Loki on the side saw this, shook his head slightly, and said helplessly, Thor, there's no need to look for it. Those giants of Jotunheim have already been taken away. As he spoke, he pointed to both sides of his feet. Looking in the direction Loki pointed, Those bodies that had been turned into pieces suddenly fell into Thor's eyes. Looking at the giants at his feet who were covered with a layer of dark blue skin, Thor still said angrily, "The Jotun giants must pay for what they have done." When he came to the end of the corridor and looked at the casket of ancient winters placed on the stone pillar in front of him, Odin looked calm. They have paid with their lives. The destroyer has done his duty. Casket of ancient winters is safe and everything is fine. Is everything okay? Thor behind him frowned and said loudly, "They broke into Odin's treasure house. If the giants of Jotunheim stole any treasure, they didn't steal it, did they? But I wonder why." After a moment of silence, Odin slowly said, "I have a truce agreement with Lauf, the king of Jotunheim. But he just broke the agreement. They know you have a weakness." Thor's voice became louder and louder, looking straight ahead at Odin's back, his eyes full of unwilling anger. Odin frowned slightly, turned around slowly, looked at Thor and asked, "Then what action are you going to take?" "As you once did, march on Jotunheim and teach them a lesson. Scare them out so they don't dare to attack again. You just think from the perspective of a warrior? This is an act of war. This is just a small part of the behavior that is destined to fail. Look at these giants of Jotunheim. Where have they gone? Don't worry, we will find the defense loopholes and fix them." Hearing Odin's answer, Thor's face became even more dissatisfied, and he said angrily, "As the king of Asgard? But you are not the king." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Odin waving his hand. His brows were furrowed, and the peaceful look on his face was no longer there. A huge and majestic momentum suddenly surged out of his old-looking body, and the air around him seemed to be stagnant. The expressions of Thor and the two people present changed when they were oppressed, and they were speechless. "Not yet." After saying this, Odin took a deep look at his son, and then quickly left here. Returning to the palace, Odin announced without warning that the throne transfer ceremony was officially cancelled, and then dismissed all the people in the hall. Although people were a little puzzled by this, they still got up and left one after another. After a while, the originally bustling hall suddenly became silent and empty. Looking at the empty hall, Thor could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He angrily overturned the long table in the hall to the ground, and then sat on the steps nearby. A trace of confusion flashed across his face. At this time, a burst of footsteps sounded from behind. Looking back, Thor's angry voice sounded, "It's not a wise move to accompany me now, brother." Although he said this, when he saw Loki coming over, his body still honestly made room for his brother. After the other person sat down, Thor continued, "Today was supposed to be my day of glory. I was supposed to become the king of Asgard today, but my father—" Having said this, Thor stopped talking, but there was still a look of unwillingness on his face. "That day will come." Beside Thor, Loki spoke softly, comforting, "It will come sooner or later." There was a faint flash of light in his eyes, and he looked around calmly, then leaned into Thor's ear and whispered, "Actually, I always thought you were right. About giants of Jotunheim, about Lauf about them. If they can break through Asgard's defenses once, who's to say they won't come back again? When they come next time, they might bring troops with them." Hearing his brother's words, Thor perked up, as if he had found a confidant, and nodded repeatedly, "That's right. That's what I thought." Seeing Thor's reaction, Loki was overjoyed and quickly started to fight again. "But any action you take will go against my father's wishes. So we'd better listen to our father's orders and don't do anything." Sure enough, after hearing his persuasion, Thor's face became even more angry. He seemed to have made a decision in his heart, and immediately stood up and walked forward. Seeing Thor's actions, Loki's expression changed. A trace of panic appeared in his eyes, and he repeatedly advised, "No, no, no. I understand your expression. Thor, you can't." "Loki." Thor interrupted him with a wave of his hand and looked at him with an extremely serious face. "This is the only way to ensure the safety of our defense. Thor, this is madness." "Crazy? What level of madness is this?" Thor frowned and said with an unprecedented seriousness, "I'm going to Jotunheim. This time, I must give those giants 10 lessons. My father marched all the way to Jotunheim, defeated their army, and took their casket of ancient winters. I believe I can do the same." Thor's eyes gradually brightened, as if he had figured something out, and his body was constantly filled with fighting spirit. He had obviously made up his mind. Then Fandral, Hogun, Volstagg, and Sif, all of his extraordinary subordinates who had followed him for hundreds of years, gathered together and announced their decisions to them. After hearing the news that Thor decided to go to Jotunheim, as expected, the 4 of them were shocked. Chapter 329, Part 1. "Thor, are you serious?" Fandral frowned and looked ahead with an extremely solemn expression. "That's Jotunheim. That place is no joke. Can just a few of us go there and defeat those giants? At this time, a tall and strong man who was drinking rum, could even be said to be a bit bloated, with a red beard that was particularly eye-catching, couldn't help but said, "Thor, although you are now it's already strong. But if we go to that ghost place like this, maybe we won't be able to come back. It would be fine if you meet the ordinary giants of Jotunheim, but if you meet that guy Lauf." The atmosphere was stagnant for a while. You know, the war between Asgard and Jotunheim has been going on for thousands of years. Although because of the agreement signed between Odin and Lauf, small-scale battles still occur from time to time. As for what kind of strength the giants of Jotunheim have, but I know it well. Even the weakest among them, as long as they reach adulthood, the giants of Jotunheim can reach around the surface level of strength. In terms of actual combat ability, it can even be said to be comparable to Bumblebee and others. If they are stronger, there are many 473 strong men who are even comparable to Optimus Prime and even extraordinary strong men. As for the king of these giants of Jotunheim, Lauf, although his strength is no longer at the peak, he is definitely half the level. The existence of the pinnacle of God. Among Thor and his group, although Thor's strength has successfully broken through to the demigod level, there is obviously still a big gap compared with veteran powerhouses like Lauf. Except for Thor and Loki, the four warriors of Asgard are all of extraordinary strength. With their level of strength, if they go to Jotunheim like this, their chances of winning are absolutely pitiful. "Hey, guys!" As if feeling his partner's hesitation, Yuanar quickly shouted, "Don't be like this. Don't you believe in my power? I am the god of thunder and storm, the son of God King Odin, Thor Odin, the new king of Asgard." But not now. Sif, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke, looking directly into Thor's eyes, and said calmly, "What does it matter?" Thor's face froze, and then he argued, "You all know the reason. If it weren't for those giants who caused trouble, my father would have handed over the throne to me. And the fact that those giants can come here without alerting the guards means that they must have mastered some secret passage or something. If this is not found out as soon as possible, who knows what they will do in the future?" This reason was something that Thor just came up with. It has to be said that his mind suddenly became brighter. After hearing his words, everyone's expressions changed, including Loki's. Seeing everyone's reaction, Thor was overjoyed and quickly kept up his efforts. "Guys, as long as we go to Jotunheim this time, maybe we can find the secret passage through which they come to us. Isn't this a good thing for us? Guys, don't tell me you don't dare to go there now?" It seemed like the last straw that broke the camel's back. After hearing Thor's last question, angry looks appeared on several people's faces, their hesitation suddenly dissipated, and their eyes instantly became firm. "Okay, I can't beat you, I'll join." Fandral shrugged and said helplessly. The other three looked at each other, drunk. Seeing the reactions of the four people, Thor smiled with satisfaction, then thought of something and turned to look at Loki. "How about it, brother? Do you want to come with us?" Facing Thor's invitation, Loki stood up slowly, his handsome face slowly outlined an arc, and nodded lightly. "Definitely." Seeing this, Thor laughed boldly and stopped hesitation. He immediately led everyone to leave the palace and headed towards Bifrost. After a while, when several people stepped across the long passage, they slowly stopped at the entrance of Bifrost. Thor took the lead and stepped forward, looking at the man standing in front of the entrance, wearing golden armor and holding a huge amount of two-handed sword, and was about to speak. "Your Highness Thor." "AFDB, the man spoke first. You should understand what you are going to do next." "Heimdall." Thor looked directly at the other party without giving in. "Then you should also understand that I have a reason to do this." After a moment of silence, Heimdall slowly turned around and walked towards the inside of Bifrost. Thor and others quickly followed. Arriving at the internal console, Heimdall raised his sword high and looked at everyone with his golden eyes, his face serious. "I warn you, as a guard, I will abide by my oath to protect the kingdom. If your return threatens the safety of Asgard, Bifrost will not be opened for you. You will be left to die in the cold desert of Jotunheim." After hearing this, several people's expressions changed. "Heimdall, can't you always turn on Bifrost for us? If you keep turning it on, all the energy of Bifrost will be released. Destroy the entire Jotunheim, including you. I'm not planning to die today." Thor smiled and turned back to look at everyone, his face full of confidence. "Asgard, we must win. Must win." Accompanied by the shouts of everyone, the next moment, the big sword instantly fell into the center of the console, and a dazzling light instantly appeared in front of several people, and then a huge amount of suction appeared out of thin air, instantly swallowing Thor and others. In the dark and silent universe, a dazzling rainbow-like light beam instantly shot out from Asgard, drawing a long trajectory in the universe, crashing through the space in front of it, and shooting straight towards a planet covered by ice in the Nine Realms. When the light gradually dissipated, Thor and others came back to their senses. What appeared in front of them at this moment was the planet named Jotunheim. When the few people finally landed on land, as the Bifrost light dissipated and looking around, their faces gradually became serious. The top of the head is not illuminated by the sun's rays all year round, and it seems to be shrouded in a dark curtain. The surroundings are pitch black, and the wind and snow blowing from time to time in the air add a sense of despair and desolation to the planet. Feeling the temperature around them, even with their physiques that are beyond ordinary people, they can still feel a bone-chilling cold. Looking at their feet, not far from them, an abyss with no bottom appeared at a glance, and endless snow-capped mountains spread around them. Standing on this piece of land for only a few minutes, several of them felt faintly. His body became a little stiffer. Maybe we shouldn't be here. Hogan on the side complained a few words in a low voice. Let's go. Ignoring this, Thor took the lead and walked forward. Upon seeing this, several people looked at each other, said nothing more, and followed silently. After advancing for about an hour and passing through a long tunnel, the last few people slowly stopped in front of a huge palace standing in the wind and snow, covered in ice. This is where the king of giants of Jotunheim, Difei, lives. Chapter 330, Part 1. Looking around, Sif asked with some confusion, "Where are they?" "They are all hiding." Thor sneered disdainfully. "It's just a common trick of a group of cowards." As soon as he finished speaking, a deep voice instantly passed through the barrier of the palace and reached the ears of several people outside. "It's really brave of you to come all the way to die, Asgardians." Thor showed no fear, raised his head and shouted loudly, "I am Thor Odinson. I know who you are. How did your people get into Asgard?" After a moment of silence, a cold snort slowly came from the palace. The Odin family has no shortage of traitors. After hearing this, Loki's eyes moved slightly next to Thor, but he soon calmed down. "Don't slander my father with lies." An angry look appeared on Thor's face, and a faint thunder appeared in the right hand holding the short hammer. However, his words seemed to irritate the other party, and his voice instantly became more urgent and violent. The next moment, an oppressive and at the same time an aura that made people unconsciously feel cold and bone-chilling spread out from the palace. "Come, press on Thor and his party. Your father is an executioner, a thief. I don't think there's anything wrong with what I said. Why did you come here this time? Are you here to make peace with me?" Immediately afterwards, a tall figure slowly walked out of the ice and snow, sitting high on the throne, looking down at the few people. The corners of Lauf's lips curled up into a disdainful sneer. "Thor Odinson, you look forward to war. You long for it to come. You're just a little boy trying to prove he's an adult. One day, you will pay the price for your character." As the words fell, Thor and his party were surrounded by dark blue giants, all of them more than 2 meters tall, with lines engraved on their skin. They slowly walked out and surrounded them. The ice-blue eyes all stared at him, not concealing the murderous intent in their eyes. They moved their feet slightly, ready to attack at any time. As long as their king gives the order, these giants of Jotunheim will attack Thor and his party without hesitation until they die. Really? The anger in Thor's heart was almost uncontrollable. His brows furrowed, and arcs of electricity flashed in his eyes. "Then let me, a little boy, see what price you can make me pay?" After saying that, blue thunder and lightning appeared on Thor's body and wrapped around his body. A powerful aura spread all around, not hiding the fighting intention in his heart. Thor. Seeing this scene, Loki was heartbroken and quickly stepped forward to try to dissuade him. "Calm down and look around. We are outnumbered now. You don't need to teach me this, brother." Thor didn't look back. His eyes were always looking forward, and his fighting spirit showed no sign of diminishing. "You don't know what your actions will lead to." Seeing Thor's reaction, Lauf's eyes flashed coldly. His face was calm, and he said coldly, "But I know." A heavy sigh came. "You go, before I change my mind. This is the last chance I give you." Looking at the tall figure coming to them step by step, and feeling the heavy pressure coming from the other person, their expressions tightened and their hearts suddenly lifted. Loki's heart skipped a beat. He lowered his head slightly and asked quickly, "We will accept your most generous proposal." As he spoke, Loki reached out and gently pulled Thor beside him, signaling him to retreat. He glanced around, looking at the figures that kept appearing in the surrounding snowy mountains, and then at the solemn faces of the other people behind him. Although Thor was unwilling to do so, for the sake of Loki and others, he finally planned to leave here. However, just when he turned around and was about to leave, the next moment, Lauf's voice sounded again. "Go home, little princess." Damn it. As soon as these words came out, Loki's face instantly turned ugly and he cursed in a low voice. Then, 2 slender daggers instantly stretched out from his robe and held them tightly in the palm of his hand. "We are ready for battle." Sure enough, after hearing Lauf's words, Thor paused for an instant and chuckled. The next moment, violent lightning surged out of his body, wrapped around Mjolnir in his right hand, and erupted into harsh roars. Lightning flashed and thunder danced with the storm. Thor clenched the short hammer in his hand, tensed his muscles, turned around and blasted out the hammer, hitting Lauf hard on the chest behind him. Boom. There was a dull, loud noise. Maybe because he didn't expect Thor to actually dare to take action, Lauf was unprepared and was instantly hit by the hammer for hundreds of meters. His body smashed into the palace behind him, shattering the layer behind him. The thick wall wrapped in ice then became silent. 03L. Thor's hammer was like a signal, instantly arousing the anger of the giants of Jotunheim around them. They all let out terrifying roars, jumped up, and jumped down from the surrounding snowy mountains in an instant, and then ran towards Thor and his party. 0. Please give me flowers. Among these giants of Jotunheim, as those who guard the palace, their strength is undoubtedly the elite among the entire giants of Jotunheim clan. They are generally of extraordinary level of strength. On Earth, even destroying a city is nothing. Difficult matter. Especially the three figures at the front who look only a little shorter than Lauf. The aura exuded by them is faintly comparable to that of Thor Loki. Obviously, they are also demigod-level existences. In just a few breaths, hundreds of giants of Jotunheim surrounded a few people, raised their weapons high, and launched an attack without hesitation. Point 0. Come on. Show you damn giants of Jotunheim. Thor the Emperor of Thor. Facing this scene, Thor showed no fear on his face. Countless thunder and lightning emerged from his body, and electric snakes danced wildly in the air, shooting out in all directions. The electric snake spread rapidly outwards, instantly penetrating dozens of giants of Jotunheim around it. Under the action of the high temperature of lightning, the body instantly shattered and fell. Upon seeing this, the two leading demigod-level giants of Jotunheim let out a roar and waved the sharp blade made of ice in their hands. Dawson's white-cold energy surged and slashed hard in the direction of Thor and through it. As for the other demigod-level giants of Jotunheim, they attacked in the direction of Loki without any hesitation. At the same time, hundreds of other giants rushed to the battlefield. Without concealing the piercing murderous intent in their eyes, they waved their ice knives and involuntarily surrounded the others and launched an attack. Although in terms of strength, with the blessing of Mjolnir's artifact in his hand, Mjolnir can steadily defeat any giants of Jotunheim in front of him. But at this moment, he was facing two giants with demigod strength. Faced with the siege of the two giants, with his current strength, it was somewhat difficult to deal with them. Ji was in a hurry to deal with his opponent, and was obviously unable to offer help. After Thor and the two were dragged away, they faced constant siege from giants all around. Soon, the four Sifs had wounds on their bodies, and their auras continued to start. After weakening, the resistance gradually began to weaken. Upon seeing this, Thor's expression suddenly changed. Lightning surged in his eyes, and his divine power exploded without hesitation. Get out of my way. Chapter 331, Part 1. The divine power exploded, and the electric light on Thor's body instantly became several times more dazzling. The short hammer in his hand was entangled with thunder, making deafening roars. A white wave of air visible to the naked eye instantly emerged from Thor's body, and then spread rapidly to the surroundings. The terrifying shockwave exploded, followed by dense thunder and lightning, slamming down on the two giants of Jotunheim in front of them. Because they were not prepared at all, the two of them were subconsciously knocked several meters away by this shockwave. Before they could wait, when they reacted, terrifying thunder and lightning instantly wrapped around them. Roar! Painful roars sounded. Facing Thor's lightning attack, even as demigods, both of them felt a strong sting, as if they had been pricked by thousands of steel needles, and they were in unbearable pain. The moment he knocked back the two giants of Jotunheim, Thor roared wildly, and Mjolnir was wrapped in thunder and lightning, and then threw it hard at another demigod giant of Jotunheim in the direction of 960. Just as he was about to hit the target, the next moment, a huge palm full of dark blue and covered with lines stretched out and was in front. Get away! A thick layer of ice instantly surged out from the palm of his hand, forming an extremely thick ice shield. Divine power was wrapped around it. But as soon as it appeared, the already extremely cold environment around him instantly became even colder, as if it was about to engulf the soul. It's so frozen that a chill can't help but feel in your heart. Boom! At the moment when the shield was generated, Mjolnir instantly bombarded the shield. Countless thunder and lightning surged out instantly, wild thunder raged, and with huge amounts of impact force, it crazily destroyed the shield. In fact, with Thor's current divine power, there is obviously still a considerable gap compared with Lauf. Even though Lauf's strength has been greatly reduced due to injury, he is still much better than Thor. But thanks to the existence of Mjolnir, the artifact owned by Thor, this was an artifact created by Odin using the dying fixed star and the precious URU metal through the hands of the dwarf clan. In terms of power, it is comparable to the casket of ancient winters, the artifact of the Frost clan. Such a powerful artifact, coupled with Thor's thunder power, immediately explodes with extremely powerful destructive power. Instantly destroying the shield in front of him was smashed into pieces, and then it hit Lauf hard. Damn hammer! Caught off guard, Lauf was immediately staggered and fell heavily to the ground. With a dull loud noise, a deep hole was instantly created in the ground built by ice. Oh Dinson! Lauf's eyes flashed with a trace of crazy killing intent, and he quickly stood up. The ice power on his body was condensed, forming a pair of two-handed swords whose entire body was made of ice. Covered in ice armor, his whole body exuded an extremely heavy power as he slashed forward. With one strike of the sword, an endless blizzard spurted out instantly, forming a huge, raging cold current, like thousands of horses galloping, rushing in all directions. In anger, Lauf had already exploded with all his strength with this blow, and the terrifying divine power came out of his body, blessing the sword. With the blessing of divine power, in an instant, the terrifying cold current spread out with Lauf as the center. In just a short moment, it has spread to a radius of thousands of miles, turning this area into a huge ice and snow kingdom covered with thick ice for a month. Before Thor and the others could react, a terrifying chill instantly passed through their bodies, instantly freezing them into ice sculptures and burying them in the thick layer of ice and snow. Definitely, the giants of Jotunheim, who are naturally close to ice and snow, are not within the scope of being frozen. Even though they were trapped in the thick ice, they just used a little force to break out of the ice in an instant, jumped up, and stood on top of the ice. King! Facing the direction of Lauf, a group of giants of Jotunheim knelt on one knee and lowered their heads, their faces full of respect. Looking around, Lauf then looked at Thor and his group who were still in the ice. His face moved slightly, and he was about to speak. Boom! At this moment, there was a sudden explosion, and the ice shattered instantly. Then, Loki broke out of the ice, with divine power surging all over his body. Along with the explosions, even the ice beside Thor and his party instantly shattered. Kylai successfully broke away from ice. Bang bang bang! Under the astonished gazes of the giants of Jotunheim, Thor and his team successfully escaped. Before they could react, the next moment, a short hammer wrapped with thunder and lightning fell from the sky. The raging thunder and lightning raged, instantly killing several giants of Jotunheim. Jotunheim was blown to pieces. Thor! Lauf's blue eyes flashed with a violent killing intent. He gathered the swords in his hands and jumped up violently, crushing the ice under his feet. A deep pit emerged. The next moment, huge amounts of body instantly passing dozens of meters, he swung down heavily in the direction of Thor. Since you are already here, stay forever. Stop dreaming. I am Thor. Holding Mjolnir in hand, Thor roared wildly and rushed forward without hesitation. Boom! Huge amounts of roars sounded, thunder and lightning collided with ice. The sky was instantly occupied by blue and white, and a terrifying impact spread around, including Loki and the rest of the giants of Jotunheim. As if they were hit by a heavy hammer, it was smashed and flew backwards instantly. After a while, even though the power of the artifact allowed Thor to compete with Lauf for a short time, as time passed, the divine power in Thor's body gradually depleted, and without the blessing of divine power, Mjolnir was unable to continue to exert its power. Gradually, Thor the resistance is also gradually weakening, and there are faint signs of failure. Boom! With a loud noise and under Lauf's bombardment, Thor finally couldn't hold on any longer, and his body turned into a huge amount of human-shaped cannonball, flying backwards several hundred meters and slamming into the snowy mountains behind him. Blowing away the ice created a huge amount of deep pit, and countless ice cubes wrapped in rocks rolled downwards and hit the ground, and the ground began to faintly tremble. Thor! Seeing this scene, Loki and his team's expressions all changed, and they subconsciously exclaimed, "Don't worry." The next moment, Lauf's voice sounded from behind, "It's your turn next. This time, none of you can even think of leaving here." Watching Lauf walk in step by step, Loki subconsciously took a step back, a hint of panic flashing across his face. Behind him, Sif and the others were holding the weapons in their hands tightly, with solemn expressions on their faces, wanting to launch an attack. However, under the pressure of Lauf's heavy aura belonging to a demigod, it was difficult to even raise his hands. Incomparable. The hundreds of giants of Jotunheim around them slowly gathered in the direction of Loki and others, their eyes flashing with cold luster, not concealing the killing intent in their hearts. Looking at the giants of Jotunheim that gradually surrounded them, a trace of despair gradually rose in their hearts. With the strongest combat power among their group, after Thor was injured, they were now facing the siege of the giants of Jotunheim, which had 4 strong demigods. At this moment, they were already in a desperate situation. Let me sleep in Jotunheim forever. Raising the big sword in his hand, Lauf's eyes flashed with a cold luster, and then he struck hard at Loki and the others. Boom! However, just when Lauf was about to give them the final blow, the The next moment, a bright white lightning suddenly fell from the sky and fell straight in the direction of Lauf. Chapter 332, Part 1. The attack came too suddenly. Lauf was unprepared and was instantly enveloped by the huge amounts of lightning. His body was eroded by a terrifying divine power and instantly turned pitch black, looking extremely miserable. Ah! A painful roar came. Lauf's face turned ferocious, his eyes turned red. He looked up to somewhere in the sky, and a low roar sounded. Odin! A spear made of ice was instantly generated in the palm of the hand, and then it was thrown somewhere in the sky. Boom! The next moment, a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, hitting the spear in front, and then instantly blasted it into pieces. Lauf! Odin's figure slowly fell from the sky, illuminated by a dazzling light, and landed not far in front of everyone. The eternal spear in his hand hit the ground heavily. Odin was wearing a dazzling golden armor, his eyes were calm, and the terrifying majesty of the King of God enveloped the entire audience. The air around him seemed to freeze instantly, and heavy pressure shrouded him. Everyone seemed to be carrying a heavy mountain on their backs, and even breathing seemed difficult. I came here this time to take my children home. Lauf, let them go. Staring at Odin's figure, Lauf's crimson eyes did not hide the killing intent, and a deep voice sounded. Odin, you should understand that they broke the agreement first. Lauf, don't forget, it was your people who crossed this line first. Odin's face was calm, and the aura exuding from his body became heavier. If I want to say who broke the agreement first, I think it should be you are right. As he spoke, a dazzling light emerged from Odin's body. The powerful divine power was instilled into the eternal spear in his hand. The extremely sharp momentum instantly rose into the sky, cutting through the thick clouds in the sky. The golden sun rays fell, and the long-lost warmth returned. Shine upon the earth. If you don't agree, the agreement between us will be void. When the time comes, I will do whatever it takes to destroy Jotunheim. The giants of Jotunheim will be turned into the dust of history. Feeling the growing power of Odin, he stared at him for a moment. Finally, the anger on Lauf's face gradually disappeared, and then he slowly regained his composure. Turn around and walk towards the palace behind you. Let them go. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He stopped and said without looking back, But Odin, this is the last time. If I meet them here next time, I won't hold back anymore. After saying that, Lauf strode forward, and when he passed Loki in front of him, a strange color flashed in Lauf's eyes, and then he quickly regained his composure and gradually disappeared into the ice and snow. Seeing this, the remaining giants of Jotunheim all around looked at each other without saying a word, and then disappeared silently into the snow. Seeing the figures of the giants of Jotunheim leaving, Loki and the others breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, kids, let's go. Odin's voice sounded, and he waved gently to Loki and others, his face calm. Father! Loki walked quickly towards Odin, but just as they were halfway there, the next moment, boom! On a snow-capped mountain hundreds of meters away from everyone, dazzling thunder exploded, and then, a figure wearing a red cloak and holding a short hammer rushed out of the snow-capped mountain in an instant, straight into the sky. Lauf, I haven't given up yet. Come and fight me again, father. In the sky, Thor's face was covered with blood, and his body was covered with countless ice shards. He looked extremely embarrassed. Although his body was seriously injured, Thor's fighting spirit at this moment has not weakened even half a bit. The dense thunder on his body is surging and shining, and his momentum is amazing. Slowly descending from the sky and coming to Odin's side, Thor was about to say something, but was interrupted by Odin's wave of his hand. Let's go. After saying that, the next moment, a bright beam of light fell from the sky instantly, wrapping Li Ding and others in Bing. When the light dissipated, Odin and others also disappeared. Asgard, interior of the palace hall. Thor. On the throne, Odin looked down condescendingly. Although his face was calm, in the hall at this moment, a heavy pressure filled the entire hall. His heart seemed to be carrying a mountain on his back, and even breathing became a little difficult. Point. Do you know what you are doing and what you are dancing about? I'm defending my home. Thor raised his head stubbornly and said loudly, You can't even protect your own brothers and partners. Why should you protect this kingdom? Odin's eyes froze for a moment, looking into Thor's eyes, and then looked away briefly. If we were afraid of action, the kingdom would have perished long ago. What else can we protect? Thor showed no sign of weakness. His voice became louder and louder, like a roaring lion, and the hall continued to echo with his voice. The giants of Jotunheim must learn to fear me as they once feared you. This way they will learn to be obedient. This is pride and arrogance, not leadership ability. Thor, you are too reckless. Odin's voice became deeper and deeper. You have forgotten everything I taught you, the patience of a warrior. While you are waiting and patient, the 9 kingdoms are laughing at us. Thor held his head high, his face full of confusion and anger. You saw Asgard being thrown away, but you only talked about it. Shut up. Odin waved the eternal spear in his hand vigorously, hitting the ground hard, and an angry look appeared on his face. Thor, you are a vain, greedy, and cruel child. Upon hearing this, Thor was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted. Anger rushed into his brain, completely losing his mind, and shouted angrily, "You are a stupid old man." As soon as these words came out, the hearts of Loki and the other 4 people behind him jumped, and a look of horror appeared on their faces. The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. After a while, Odin finally sighed softly and looked down, his eyes filled with unconcealable disappointment. "Yeah, I'm a stupid old man. I thought you were ready." He slowly raised his head, his face gradually returned to calm, looked down, looked directly at Thor, and slowly said, "Thor Odinson, 517 You disobeyed the king's clear instructions. Due to your arrogance and stupidity, the peaceful kingdom and innocent creatures may face the horror of war. You are unworthy of Asgard. You are unworthy of your title. You are unworthy of the person who loves you who you betrayed." With a wave of his hand, the next moment, Thor's armor automatically began to fall off. "Now, I want to take back your ability." With a move of her hand, Mjolnir was immediately out of Thor's grasp and returned to Li Ding's hands. "In the name of my father and grandfather, I, the king of God, Odin, banish you." After saying that, Odin held the short hammer in his hand tightly and pointed it in the direction of Thor. A brilliant beam of light burst out and hit Thor's body instantly. Under the impact of huge amounts of impact, Thor's body instantly flew backwards, falling straight into the direction of Bifrost, and slowly disappeared without a trace in the brilliant beam of light. After doing all this, Odin gently lifted Mjolnir and whispered, "No matter who holds this hammer in the future, as long as he is worthy, he will have the power of Thor." As soon as he finished speaking, the rune engraved on the surface of the hammer lit up instantly, and then slowly fell silent. With a strong flick, Mjolnir in his hand instantly flew out of his hand, falling straight into the direction of Bifrost, and dissipated instantly along with Thor. Let's not talk about Asgard for now. When Mjolnir reappeared, the artifact turned into a small meteor, with a long flame trailing from its tail, and by accident, it headed towards Chen Luo, who had just appeared on Earth. Chapter 333, Part 1. Looking at the short hammer falling from the sky, it hit Chen Luo's head head-on. Without any time to think about it, Chen Luo subconsciously stretched out his right hand, intending to take it. Boom. However, the moment the hammer fell into his hand and made contact with his palm, Chen Luo's expression suddenly changed. Accompanied by a terrifying loud noise, Chen Luo didn't even have time to react. His arm instantly shattered into countless pieces, with blood, flesh and bones flying everywhere. Then the hammer was mounted on Chen Luo's chest with unabated force, including the person. Smash it to the ground. Huge amounts of impact broke out suddenly, filling the sky with smoke and dust, covering all directions. When the smoke and dust dissipated, a huge crater with a diameter of about tens of meters appeared in the originally barren open space, and the depth reached about 5 meters. It looked like it was formed by a meteorite impact, and in the center of this huge amount of deep pit, a strange scene emerged. Chen Luo's eyes were closed tightly, and he was lying in a deep human-shaped pit, motionless, as if he had fallen into a coma. At this moment, on his chest, a short hammer was placed diagonally on it, standing quietly. The combination of the two looked indescribably weird. This short hammer is none other than Mjolnir thrown by Odin from the direction of Asgard. It was just a casual throw, but unexpectedly, at the moment when the hammer was released, Chen Luo happened to appear directly under the hammer. In addition, Chen Luo didn't think much at that time, and just stretched out his hand to resist without even the thought of dodging, which resulted in the current tragedy. In fact, with Chen Luo's strength, he would not be in a coma after receiving such a blow. However, he had just fought with the god Mephisto not long ago, and most of the divine power in his body had been consumed, and he was close to running out of gas. This led to the current result. But fortunately, with Chen Luo's current ability to recover, he has reached a higher level again after successfully becoming a demigod. Therefore, he only fell asleep for about 2 hours. Before anyone else noticed, Chen Luo returned from the demigod level again. Wake up from drowsiness. And while he was sleeping, the arm that had been shattered by the short hammer also grew again silently, with no trace of anything strange at all. What's happening here? As soon as he opened his eyes, Chen Luo subconsciously wanted to get up, but the hammer on his chest held him down, unable to move at all. Feeling something strange coming from his chest, Chen Luo subconsciously looked down. When he saw clearly the hammer placed diagonally on his chest, Chen Luo was stunned, and doubts flashed in his eyes. Wait, Why does this hammer look familiar? After staring at the hammer for a long time, Chen Luo finally seemed to remember something, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Could it be that thing? Some unbelievers tried to use force to lift the short hammer on his chest. However, no matter how hard he tried, the hammer remained motionless like a real mountain, still firmly pressing him in place. Seeing this, Chen Luo finally confirmed his thoughts. With this familiar shape, coupled with the ability that even Chen Luo's power cannot shake, there is no doubt that this is the artifact controlled by Thor, Mjolnir. According to his understanding, if this artifact is not approved by it, no one will be able to lift it. If you try to use force to lift it up, this is something that even the Hulk, who was in an angry state and whose strength surged, couldn't do it. The Hulk at that time was much stronger than Chen Luo now, and it was even possible to break through 1,000 tons. However, even this level of huge force cannot shake this artifact in the slightest, so Chen Luo can't even mention it. After all, this artifact was made from the dying fixed star. If you want to use brute force to shake it, according to Chen Luo's estimation, it will probably have to reach the level of lifting the planet. Group control. To reach that level, the strength required is something he can't even imagine now. Even if that happens one day, I'm afraid it will only be possible after his physique becomes a god. Since there was nothing he could do with his strength, Chen Luo stopped trying, and instead used some of the newly restored divine power in his body to try to escape the suppression of this artifact. After the blood god power was successfully condensed, Chen Luo also discovered another use of this divine power. Perhaps because of the special nature of divine power, Chen Luo at this moment can even use this power to achieve local blood operations in the body. Definitely, with his current ability, he is still unable to transform his entire body into blood form. Perhaps it is due to lack of divine power, or perhaps the demigod stage cannot support him to achieve such operations, but even so, this ability has greatly improved his ability. Recovery and survival ability. In the previous battle with Mephisto, this ability also provided him with considerable help. With a thought, the next moment, Chen Luo's chest instantly turned into a pool of bright red blood. The blood slowly swam from both sides, and finally, a large transparent hole appeared in Chen Luo's chest. Without the support of flesh and blood, the artifact on Chen Luo's chest sank suddenly, passed through his chest, and fell to the ground. The ground shook slightly for a moment, and then calmed down again. Putting his hands on the ground, he slowly straightened up. When he stood up again, the blood in his chest surged again, filling the big hole in it, slowly extending, and then transformed into a flesh and blood figure again. Not long after, Chen Luo's body returned to its original state. Turning around and looking behind him, Chen Luo's eyes flickered. Before he could say anything, the next moment, an engine roar sounded from not far behind him. Realizing that someone was coming, Chen Luo didn't intend to stay here too long. With a thought, Chen Luo immediately left. Now that he has successfully become a demigod, Chen Luo's teleportation ability has made a qualitative leap compared to before. Now the maximum range of his teleportation has reached 100,000 miles. Even though it is still thousands of miles away from New York, it is only a thought, and he instantly appears in the courtyard at the door of his home. When I got home, it was now noon, and May and Peter had already gone out. The house seemed a little deserted, but at this moment, Chen Luo, who had just returned from hell, seemed to be living separately and warmly. Although it had been less than 2 days since he left, Chen Luo felt a little tired after experiencing so many battles in succession. Now that he finally got home, he didn't want to think too much. He immediately returned to the bedroom and fell asleep. In the next few days, Chen Luo stayed at home with peace of mind and resumed his previous life track. Definitely, less than a day after Chen Luo returned home, Fury, who had been paying attention to this place, received the news. After learning that Chen Luo had returned safely, he was instantly relieved. Originally, after learning from Phil Coulson that Chen Luo was dragged into hell, Fury was a little worried about whether Chen Luo could come back. Now that he saw that Chen Luo was safe and sound, Fury was relieved and immediately passed the news to Qianhua Zhao, fell into the ears of Phil Coulson. After hearing that Chen Luo had returned safely, Phil Coulson immediately contacted Chen Luo and expressed his apology. After all, it was Phil Coulson who personally invited Chen Luo to help him. After learning the whereabouts of Chen Luo from Johnny, Phil Coulson felt very sorry. If he hadn't been on a mission right now, Phil Coulson would have even wanted to come to Chen Luo's house in person to apologize. Chen Luo didn't blame him for this. After all, he was able to successfully break through to the demigod level this time. And this journey to hell also accounted for most of the factors. If it hadn't been for Phil Coulson's invitation, he wouldn't have known when he would have reached this point, so naturally he had no intention of complaining. Chapter 333, Part 2. And just after Chen Luo lived a peaceful life like this for a few days, this afternoon, Chen Luo was about to start preparing dinner, and then, a rapid ringing of the phone rang. Who? Chen, this is Phil Coulson. I'm really sorry. I have something else that I may need your help with. Chapter 334, Part 1. So, you're in trouble again now? Chen Luo subconsciously covered his forehead, feeling a little headache. Ahem. Phil Coulson coughed awkwardly, followed by a burst of footsteps. After a while, Phil Coulson spoke again. Chen, to be honest, if it weren't for this matter, I really can't handle it, and I didn't even think about disturbing you. After all, what we are facing this time is probably a legendary god. God. Chen Luo's eyes flickered, as if he thought of something. His expression became slightly serious, and he asked, "Tell me more specifically, what exactly is going on?" Is such that, just as Chen Luo thought, Phil Coulson has already received the news from New Mexico and set off to the destination to investigate. And there was the place where Chen Luo encountered the hammer that knocked him unconscious a few days ago. So as expected, the god Phil Coulson talks about is Thor, who was just exiled to the earth by the king of God Odin. According to Phil Coulson's description, as rumors spread in the past few days that the hammer could not be lifted, many people came here to visit the place where Mjolnir landed again and again. Started trying. However, no matter how many people try to lift this artifact, even using vehicles, excavators, and other means, they cannot shake this artifact in the slightest. As this news gradually spread, it was logical that SHIELD also received the news. When Fury sent Phil Coulson here to investigate, after trying it out, Phil Coulson finally confirmed whether the rumors were true or false. After realizing the difference between this hammer, he immediately ordered the whole place to be sealed off, and then mobilized experts in the bureau. Come and do your research. And on the night Phil Coulson ordered the area to be cordoned off, someone forced their way in from the outside of the area, came to the deep pit where Mjolnir was in the center, and tried to lift it. Not surprisingly, the other party ended up failing in the end. At the same time, Phil Coulson finally reacted and immediately sent people to arrest him. However, what surprised Phil Coulson was that the man who forced his way into the Ajay area was stronger than expected. Even if the opponent was just unarmed, in terms of combat consciousness and physical fitness, the opponent was stronger than those under him. With the number of people, this kind of fighting power is by no means as simple as ordinary people. Fortunately, although the opponent was powerful, since he was unable to lift the hammer in the pit, he seemed to have fallen into great sadness, and his resistance was greatly reduced. In the end, he became discouraged and was succeeded by Phil Coulson and his team. Captured. After careful questioning, the other party made no attempt to hide any of Phil Coulson's questions and told them all truthfully. After hearing that the man claimed to be Thor from myths and legends, Phil Coulson instantly realized the seriousness of the matter, and then quickly contacted Chen Luo, hoping to seek Chen Luo's help. If he hadn't experienced Johnny's previous incident, perhaps Phil Coulson would still have some doubts about Thor's words. But now, since Johnny learned the news about the existence of Hell, Phil Coulson is not as completely negative as before about whether Thor really exists, especially when thinking about the strangeness of the previous hammer. Regarding Thor's answer, Phil Coulson believed it even more. It was precisely because of this that Phil Coulson contacted Chen Luo as soon as possible. In his mind, since Chen Luo could successfully escape from Hell, for such a mythical character, with Chen Luo by his side, Phil Coulson felt that will be more confident. After questioning Thor just now, Phil Coulson also roughly understood the origin of the other party, especially after learning the existence of Asgard from the other party. The warning signs in Phil Coulson's heart suddenly reached the highest point. You must know that this is his first official contact with aliens, especially when this alien is Thor from myths and legends, so he cannot help but be cautious. Although according to the other party, his power was taken away by God King Odin, so apart from Superman's first-class physical fitness, he did not show any other differences from ordinary people. But based on the other party's few words, Phil Coulson could still vaguely sense that, behind the opponent, what kind of terrifying energy does this country called Asgard have? Faced with such a powerful force at the level of the overlord of the universe, the current Earth is probably not worth mentioning in front of it. If they want to have the right to speak in front of this kind of force, with a fighting force like Chen Luo on their side, maybe they will be qualified to communicate on an equal footing. On the other end of the phone, after listening to Phil Coulson's narration, Chen Luo's eyes flickered for a moment, then he nodded slowly and said, "Okay, then you wait for me there. I'll be there right away." Great. Phil Coulson was obviously relieved. "Chun, I really trouble you this time?" "You're welcome." Chen Luo chuckled. A cold light flashed in his eyes. "That's right, I still have something to talk to him about." Chun, do you and Thor have anything to do with each other?" "It's nothing." Chen Luo came back to his senses and shook his head. "Don't worry about it. Wait for me over there. I'll be there soon." "Okay, then I have to wait for you." As soon as he finished speaking, the next moment, behind Phil Coulson, Chen Luo's figure suddenly appeared in the air. Feeling the movement behind him, he subconsciously looked back and saw that Phil Coulson's face was stagnant, and he subconsciously said, "List?" Smiling and patting the other person's shoulder, Chen Luo was about to say something, but then, he seemed to suddenly feel something, and with a thought, he disappeared in an instant. The next moment, when Chen Luo appeared again, he had already reached the edge of the deep pit where he had left. Looking into the pit, I saw that at some point, a tall and slender figure suddenly appeared in it. The figure was wearing a dark green robe. He looked very handsome, and his whole body was filled with an indescribable aura. Sin Changli. At this moment, the other party was holding the handle of the hammer on the ground with both hands. His face turned red, as if he was trying to pull it up from the ground. However, no matter how hard he tried, the hammer seemed to be welded to the ground and remained motionless. Looking at the other party's figure, Chen Luo's heart moved, and he instantly understood the other party's identity. Chapter 335, Part 1. Hey friend, this is not a place where you can just come in. As soon as Chen Luo said these words, the slender figure in the deep pit suddenly froze, stopped what he was doing, turned around quickly, and looked in the direction of Chen Luo. Who are you? Looking at the gloomy expression of the other party, Chen Luo raised a smile on his face, moved his feet, and the next moment, the figure instantly disappeared in the air. When he appeared again, behind Loki, Chen Luo's voice sounded. Before asking others, should I introduce myself first? This guest who has come from afar. Hearing the movement behind him, Loki was startled. A pair of sharp blades quickly stretched out from his cuffs. He held his hands behind his back and plucked them away from behind without thinking. Facing Loki's sneak attack, Chen Luo's expression remained unchanged, with no intention of dodge. He just stood there and received the opponent's blow head-on. Even though Loki is not good at strength, with his physique, he can still unleash nearly 10 tons of destructive power. If he is willing, it is not difficult for him to lift a car. But even so, his attack was like a breeze blowing on Chen Luo's face, unable to bring him any harm. The moment the sharp blade touched Chen Luo's skin, the blood god force in his body began to operate on its own. The next moment, as the energy conversion ability of the original fusion came into play, the kinetic energy carried by the end of the sharp blade was instantly absorbed by Chen Luo, and then converted into other forms of energy are used to enhance his physical fitness. Without the blessing of kinetic energy, the sharp blade instantly stopped. Even if it had touched Chen Luo's skin, no matter how hard Loki tried, he could not go any further. What? Have you had enough fun? Chen Luo looked calm and spoke softly. After exerting force in secret for a long time, but without any results, Loki also understood the difficulty of the man behind him. His eyes flashed. He calmly retracted the sharp blade, turned around, with a slight curve in the corner of his mouth, and smiled. He opened his mouth and said, "Don't be nervous, I just said hello to you." Then, Loki glanced at Chen Luo for a long time. A hint of pride flashed across his face. He held his head high and began to introduce himself. "By the way, I haven't introduced you yet. I am the son of God King Odin, the future ruler of Asgard, the god of trickery and mischief, Loki. Mortal, when facing gods, I think you should learn to be humble." God. Chen Luo tilted his head, with a half-smile on his face. "Are you serious? But I feel that you are not as strong as that old guy Mephisto. What? Is Asgard's classification of gods different from what I know? Can demigods also call themselves gods?" Hearing this, Loki's expression changed. He frowned subconsciously, looked at Chen Luo again for a moment, and said in confusion, "Mephisto? Have you dealt with him?" "Mortal, who are you?" Loki has also heard of Mephisto's name. Although this god in hell is not on the same latitude as their Asgard, and they rarely interact with each other, if a guy like Thor, who only has muscles in his mind, doesn't read much on weekdays, I'm afraid he really doesn't know the existence of the other party. But Loki is different. He has been reading a lot since he was a child. He doesn't know everything about the powerful people at all levels of gods in the universe, but as long as it is recorded in Asgard, he knows everything. They definitely include records related to Mephisto, one of the kings of hell. Among the 7 monarchs in charge of hell, Mephisto's strength is only inferior to that of the demon king, Lucifer. His strength is not weak even among the gods. There is no doubt that in front of this true powerful god, with his current strength of only a demigod, he has no qualifications to compare with him. In front of such a powerful man, he is not even qualified to talk to him as an equal. Even in the entire Asgard, only his father, the Lord God, has the confidence to talk to him on an equal footing. Precisely because he understood the terror of the powerful gods, after hearing Chen Luo's words just now, Loki's heart suddenly shuddered. He lost all his pride and looked at Chen Luo with solemn eyes. Being able to talk to such a powerful god, it is obvious that Chen Luo is not as simple as a mortal in his eyes. "Who am I?" Chen Luo smiled. "I am just an ordinary mortal. But there is no problem in dealing with a god like you." Hearing this, Loki paused. His face gradually darkened, sneered, and said, "Mortal, I can think. Are you provoking the gods?" 0 ***. For a mortal like you, you know that it is impossible to have any connection with a god like Mephisto. Do you want to scare me with such a trick? If this is the only way, then you underestimate this god. Speaking of this, Loki thought, in the next moment, Loki's figures that looked like entities appeared all around, surrounding Chen Luo. In each Loki's hand, two sharp blades appeared, entwined with a faint emerald green luster, and stabbed forward in the direction of Chen Luo without hesitation. Mortal, I will let you know now the consequences of provoking a god. Looking at the figures gathering around him, Chen Luo still stood there, motionless. With a thought, blood god power instantly surged out of his physical body, and then formed a huge sickle about 10 meters in length in the outside air and swung it at the inner wolf. The scythe rotated once, instantly cutting all the phantom duplications created by Loki in half. As strong winds blew around, these phantoms also dissipated into the air. So that's it. You are a demigod too? More than 10 meters behind Chen Luo, Loki's figure slowly emerged from the air. He looked at the bloody sickle above Chen Luo's head and felt the familiar aura on it. His face. How is it? Are you surprised? The next moment, Chen Luo appeared behind Loki instantly, and the sickle turned into a blood-red chain, wrapping around the opponent's body and binding him firmly in place. There's another thing I want to tell you. It's not like I haven't solved this problem for a god like you. Even though he is also a strong man at the demigod level, Loki's divine power may have extraordinary effects in assisting and confusing the enemy, but in terms of frontal combat ability, there is a big gap between him and Chen Luo or Thor. Therefore, it was just a face-to-face meeting. After Chen Luo became a little more serious, Loki was defeated by him without any suspense. After being restrained by Chen Luo's divine power, no matter how hard Loki tried, he could not break free. After trying for a moment, Loki finally gave up struggling and turned his head to look at Chen Luo with an ugly expression. What kind of corpse do you want? Chapter 336, Part 1. Don't be nervous. Chen Luo smiled. Actually, I don't care much about why you came to Earth. As long as you don't offend me, you can do whatever you want. Is that so? After hearing this, Loki's expression softened slightly and he regained his composure. That's it. If you let me go, I can promise you that I won't cause you any trouble in the future. How about that? I'm afraid it's too late. Chen Luo shook his head and stared at the other person without blinking, with a faint cold light flashing in his eyes. There is still an account to be settled between Asgard and I. What do you mean? Loki frowned slightly and asked in confusion. Ah. Chen Luo chuckled, turned to look at the short hammer in the center of the pit, gritted his teeth, and said word by word, that thing must have come from your 703, right? Perhaps you don't understand, but this damn hammer accidentally hit me when it came to Earth. Do you think I should settle this debt with you? Loki. Seeing the cold light flashing in Chen Luo's eyes from time to time, Loki was speechless at this moment. He also didn't expect that this time he just came to see what his good brother looked like after he was exiled. Now he has just come here, and he hasn't even had time to go to his good brother to reminisce about the past. After Mjolnir, he thought of what his father said before. Whoever can lift this artifact can become the new Thor. After thinking of this, Loki immediately wanted to try it. Unexpectedly, he didn't try for long, and then he met Chen Luo, who suddenly appeared. He originally thought that he was just an ordinary earthling, and he could deal with him casually. However, after fighting him, he discovered that the other person was actually just like him. He is also a strong man at the demigod level. Even when it comes to real strength, the other party is far above him. Although the two of them didn't have many fights just now, according to his estimation, Chen Luo's strength is probably not lower than that of his brother. With such strength, even in today's Asgard, it is only the first echelon below the god King Odin. He didn't expect that a strong man of this level could appear on the earth. This was enough to surprise him, but what made him even more surprised and speechless was that the other party was accidentally thrown by Mai Ernie, who was thrown by his father a few days ago. I hit the target accurately, and although it didn't look like I was injured, it was obvious that this matter could not be easily reversed. He lamented in his heart, but Loki had no intention of confessing Odin. After a moment of silence, Loki raised his head and looked at Chen Luo, and said seriously, I understand. I will be responsible for this. What kind of compensation do you want? Just ask. As long as I can do it, I will try my best to satisfy you. You? Chen Luo narrowed his eyes slightly and asked with some confusion. Are you sure you can make the decision? Definitely. Loki smiled proudly, his face full of confidence. After all, I am managing Asgard now. If nothing else, some treasures can still be obtained. Is this so? Seeing the confident look on the other person's face, Chen Luo's heart skipped a beat, then shook his head and said, Since you can make the decision, I don't want any treasures as compensation. I just want to get a piece of news from you. As long as you can answer me, this matter will be over. Huh? What news? Loki was stunned and asked in confusion. I want you to tell me, after becoming a demigod, how should you continue to become stronger and become a true god? Looking directly at the other person, Chen Luo's face was extremely serious and he spoke every word. As soon as the words fell, the next moment, the atmosphere fell into silence. After a moment, Loki shook his head with an embarrassed expression, and Taguchi said, This, I really don't know very well. The power of our Acer clan automatically increases with the passage of time. As long as there is enough time, our power will naturally grow to its peak. So for us, in fact, there is no special way to increase strength. Although Loki still doesn't know at this moment that the blood flowing in his body is the blood of the giants of Jotunheim, but it has to be said that in terms of the increase in strength, the giants of Jotunheim and the Acer have the same purpose. Both of them gradually increase in strength through the passage of time, but there is one thing that needs to be noted. Only people like Thor and Loki with purer blood will successfully break through and become demigods after their strength increases to a certain extent. As for those tribesmen whose bloodline is not as good as Thor's, even if their strength will also increase over time, the upper limit is only at the extraordinary level. As for those at the level of demigods, unless there is some special opportunity in the future, it will be difficult for them to survive in their lifetime. Crossover. It is precisely because of this particularity that neither Thor nor Loki has ever thought about this kind of thing in the thousands of years since their birth. In their thinking, as long as they live long enough, sooner or later, their strength will grow to its peak state. Compared with other races in the universe, such characteristics have undoubtedly occupied huge amounts of innate advantages. Even Chen Luo couldn't help but sigh at the power of God bloodline after hearing the other party's words. Compared with the way that even after successfully becoming a demigod, he still needs to practice hard to increase his strength, Thor's method of increasing their strength is undoubtedly much easier. Being able to name themselves after the gods can be regarded as a name. Live up to it. The reason why Chen Luo wanted to get the cultivation methods for demigods from Loki was because after he officially became a demigod, Chen Luo found that the spiritual cultivation methods he had received from the system could no longer help him grow. If you want your mental attributes to continue to increase, you need to find other ways. Therefore, Chen Luo thought of this when he heard Loki say he was willing to compensate. 1.1 But since there was nothing Loki could do to help him continue to grow, Chen Luo suddenly felt a little disappointed. He shook his head and was about to say something. However, at this moment, Chen Luo suddenly remembered something, and his heart moved, and then he remained calm. Road, since you can't help me with this, I'll change my request. As a Protoss, I think you should have a lot of powerful weapons or trophies stored there. If my guess is correct, these things should be kept in a secret room like a treasure house, right? As compensation, I want to take away a weapon from this treasure house. Can you do this? Hearing Chen Luo's request, Loki lost his smile and looked extremely ugly. He looked at Chen Luo for a long time, and then refused without thinking. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't agree to this request. Chapter 337, Part 1. Yeah. Hearing that Loki rejected his request, Chen Luo narrowed his eyes slightly. A cold light flashed in his eyes and asked, Why? Can I ask? What is the reason? Huh. Loki chuckled, Sir, although I'm sorry for what happened to you, the price of just wanting to get the treasures in Odin's treasure house as compensation is a bit too high. I think you should change your request. The treasures in the treasure house cannot be given away to others so casually. But having said that, if you really want the treasure in the treasure house, you have a chance. Loki's eyes flashed, the corner of his mouth raised a slight arc, and he said with a chuckle, If you are willing to join Asgard and become a member of our Acer clan, with your strength, you are qualified to be given an artifact. After seeing Chen Luo's strength, Loki had a vague idea in his mind. Now with his good brother being exiled to the earth, and now Odin has lost his divine power due to his previous rescue in Jotunheim, and fell into Odin's sleep. Asgard now, it can be said that except for him and his mother Frigga 09 and a few other people, there are no redundant demigods to guard Asgard. If a combat power like Chen Luo joins, it will definitely be a good thing for Asgard. Very beneficial. In addition to this, there is also the fact that although he is now managing Asgard on his behalf, because he does not have the same strength as his brother Thor, coupled with his personality, he is not popular with others in Asgard. The most intuitive thing is that after he took this position, there were many people below who were dissatisfied with it. On the contrary, if he can get a strong demigod like Chen Luo to join him, then it is foreseeable that it will definitely have great benefits for his subsequent rule. After he further consolidates his position in the future, even if Thor returns from Earth again, it will not affect his throne. If the man in front of him can really help him achieve this goal, then giving him an artifact as a reward is not unacceptable. Looking at Chen Luo in front of him calmly, Lu Ji thought to himself, Sounds good. Chen Luo said with a smile on his face. So, you agree? Upon hearing this, Loki's eyes lit up and he asked hurriedly. Facing the other party's gaze, Chen Luo slowly shook his head and looked at the other party with a half-smile. But I have no interest in joining some kind of god clan, so I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. After saying this, Chen Luo paused and then continued. But if I use another chip to exchange for the qualification to enter the treasure house, I think you won't refuse. Huh? What chips? Loki was stunned and asked in confusion. Can't you see it yet? A cold light flashed in Chen Luo's eyes, and he said calmly, The bargaining chip is your life. If you refuse, then you may have to say goodbye to this world. As soon as these words came out, Loki narrowed his eyes subconsciously, lowered his head, looked at the bloody chain wrapped around his body, remained silent for a while, and then smiled helplessly and said, "Looks like I have no other choice?" Now it seems that it is indeed the case. Chen Luo nodded slightly and said with a smile. After looking at Chen Luo for a moment, Lu Ji finally spoke again. "Okay, I can promise you to let you enter the treasure house and take away a treasure. Now that we have reached an agreement, can you let me go now?" Hearing the other party's answer, Chen Luo nodded readily. "Definitely." He snapped his fingers, and then, the chains wrapped around Loki quickly turned into a stream of blood, and then disappeared into Chen Luo's body. After untying the restraints, Loki moved his body. After confirming that there was nothing strange about him, his eyes flashed, and then he turned around and looked in the direction of Chen Luo. "By the way, I still don't know what to call you." "Chen Luo." "Your Excellency Chen Luo." Loki nodded clearly, and said with a smile on his face, "You may need to wait for a while. I came here this time to see my brother, and wait for my brother and I to properly apologize. How about we set off again after we are separated?" "Definitely yes." Chen Luo smiled and nodded, looking considerate. Seeing this, the smile on Loki's face became even bigger. "Then please wait here for a moment. When I come out, we will go to Asgard together." With that said, Loki immediately turned around and walked towards the room where Thor was. However, after walking a few steps, Loki's expression suddenly changed, as if he had discovered something. He slowly turned his head and looked at Chen Luo, who was following behind him. His eyes flashed and he said helplessly, "Your Excellency Chen Luo, I am going to catch up with my brother now. Look, should you avoid it? There's nothing I can do about it." Chen Luo shrugged, narrowed his eyes and looked at the other person, and said, "After all, I'm a little worried too. If you don't plan to abide by the agreement and leave directly, then I'll be at a loss. But don't worry, I will never disturb you when your brothers meet." Hearing Chen Luo's answer, Loki's mouth twitched and he forced a smile and said, "Really? That's understandable." After saying this, Loki no longer cared about Chen Luo behind him and walked forward. Looking at the other party's leaving figure, Chen Luo's eyes flashed slightly, and he immediately followed him without saying anything. Along the way, Loki used his divine power, and without alerting anyone else, his body seemed to turn into a phantom, directly penetrating through the obstacles of the walls and arriving at the room where Thor was. As for Chen Luo, he stopped outside the door of the room where the other party was. Although he didn't intend to let Loki out of his sight, the distance was enough, and just in case, while taking off the blood-red chain, he also let a ray of his own divine power attach to the other party's hair, and he can react immediately if the other party shows signs of leaving. After getting ready, Chen Luo did not intend to listen to the conversation between the two brothers and waited quietly outside the door. Definitely, while waiting, Chen Luo also briefly told Phil Coulson about Loki. After all, he is going to the legendary Eternal Kingdom of Asgard this time. According to his understanding, it seems that the passage of time there seems to be different from that on the Earth. If he delays some time there, he may disappear for a long time on the Earth. Time. So spread the news first, so that people around him don't have to worry too much. Asgard. Mr. Chen Luo, do you want to go there? Upon hearing the news about Chen Luo, Phil Coulson's eyes lit up, and a trace of yearning flashed subconsciously on his face. "I heard that there is a country where the legendary gods live, but I don't know what it will be like." "This is easy." Chen Luo smiled, then with a thought in his mind, he disappeared in an instant. Chapter 338, Part 1. When he reappeared, he already had a camera in his hand. He held up the camera in his hand and waved it gently. "When I get there, I'll take a few photos. Then I can give you a few when I get back." "Really?" Phil Coulson was stunned for a moment, then looked at Chen Luo gratefully. "That's really troublesome." Chen Luo waved his hand casually without paying much attention. Speaking of which, if Phil Coulson hadn't reminded him, he wouldn't have thought of this aspect, and this trip would take him who knows how long. When he comes back, these photos can be given to his family as a souvenir. If everything goes well, he plans to buy some souvenirs during this trip to Asgard and bring them back. I think Chen and the others will also be very interested in such alien specialties. Afterwards, Chen Luo and Phil Coulson chatted for a while, and suddenly Chen Luo seemed to feel something. He simply waved his hand, said goodbye to Phil Coulson, and disappeared instantly. The next moment, when Chen Luo appeared again, he had already arrived at the outskirts of the base where Phil Coulson was. "It seems you've finished reminiscing about old times. How about it? Are you ready to go?" Chen Luo slowly appeared behind Loki, looked at his back, smiled and said. Hearing Chen Luo's voice, Loki stiffened and turned around slowly, with a stiff smile on his face. "Definitely yes." While saying this, Lu Ji was also sighing secretly. You must know that in order to avoid Chen Luo, the moment after the exchange with Thor, Loki burst out with all his strength, turned his body into a phantom, and ran quickly towards the outside of the base. However, No matter how fast he moved, he still couldn't escape Chen Luo's sight. Just as he stopped, the opponent caught up with him. After seeing that he couldn't get rid of Chen Luo, at this moment, Loki was completely dead. Heart. Giving up the idea of getting rid of Chen Luo, Loki raised his head and shouted loudly, "Heimdall, open Bifrost." Then, just as Chen Luo also raised his head and looked at the sky with some curiosity, a bright beam of light instantly cut through the sky, like a long rainbow bridge connecting heaven and earth, straight into the ground, covering Chen Luo and Loki. Shrouded in. The next moment, inside this bright beam of light, Chen Luo felt his body being quickly pulled toward the sky, and then dissipated in the air along with the light. When the light dissipated, Chen Luo came back to his senses and saw the surrounding scene clearly. At this moment, the appearance in front of him seemed to have completely changed. Looking at the golden walls around him and the huge passage filled with rainbow-like light behind him, Chen Luo suddenly understood that he had now arrived in the legendary Eternal Kingdom, Asgard. While he was still looking around, the next moment, a deep voice sounded from behind him. "Welcome, the strong man who has come from afar." Turning around and looking in the direction of the sound, Chen Luo narrowed his eyes slightly, feeling a little clear in his heart. As if to verify his idea, Lu Ji's voice sounded next to Chen Luo. "Your Excellency Chen Luo, this is our Asgardian from Asgard, Heimdall. He is usually the one who guards this Bifrost." Upon hearing Loki's introduction, Chen Luo's eyes flashed slightly, but without saying anything more, he nodded to the other party as a greeting. Naturally, Chen Luo is very familiar with the existence of Heimdall, and based on the information he knew at the time, the opponent's strength was undoubtedly at the top level in the entire Asgard. He might not be able to compete with Thor, who would be further tempered and greatly improved in strength later, but he could still be considered a strong man at the demigod level. And in terms of true strength, it may be much stronger than Loki. The powerful strength, coupled with the opponent's pair of divine eyes that are said to be able to perceive all things, have also led to its unshakable position in Asgard. You must know that Heimdall has never been very fond of Loki. Even if the entire Asgard is now managed by Loki, he has openly questioned it. However, even so, Loki never thought about doing anything to him. After all, with Heimdall's ability, he is indeed the best candidate to take charge of Bifrost. If he were to be replaced by someone else, without those eyes that can observe everything, they would be in the universe. In a certain corner, even if they wanted to summon Bifrost to take them home, there would probably be no response. With Loki's intelligence, he naturally understands the irreplaceability of Heimdall, so even if the other party has openly questioned him, he will do everything possible to bring the other party into his camp. It's just that none of his actions worked. On the other side, Heimdall looked at Chen Luo in front of him, and his heart was filled with waves. Maybe Loki and the others are not very familiar with Chen Luo, but for Heimdall, this name is very familiar to him. After the battle with Apocalypse, as Chen Luo's name as the God Killer gradually spread, Heimdall became concerned about Chen Luo after hearing the name accidentally. Just like the battle between Chen Luo and Wu Shima some time ago, Heimdall watched the whole battle from a distance. If the strength shown by Chen Luo at that time was already very impressive, however, after seeing the death of the witch heart demon, Mephisto suddenly appeared and designed to drag Chen Luo into hell. At that time, even Heimdall felt that Chen Luo there is no possibility of occurrence. However, what he didn't expect was that after hearing Loki's call today, he would actually see Chen Luo again. And through perception, Heimdall can vaguely feel a hint of threat from Chen Luo. It can be seen that Chen Luo's strength has definitely improved now. If his feeling is correct, it is very likely that Chen Luo will truly grow into a strong man at the demigod level. From the opponent's battle with Apocalypse a few years ago to now, it has only been a short 8 years. In such a short period of time, the strength has been improved to the current level. To be honest, Heimdall has never seen such exaggerated progress in the past. Amplitude. Precisely because he understood the difficulty, when facing Chen Luo, Heimdall showed no pride as a Protoss and immediately greeted him as the difficulty master. Definitely, Chen Luo was not in the mood to speculate on Heimdall's thoughts. Now that he was here, he had not forgotten his purpose of coming here. He turned to look at Loki and asked, "Loki, now that we are here, when are we going to the treasure house?" Facing Chen Luo's question, Loki smiled and did not answer directly. Instead, he led Chen Luo into the long passage of the main camp. Passing through this long passage, the two came to the interior of the palace, where Loki lived. When they got here, Loki first motioned for Chen Luo to take a seat, and then spoke to the Taoist priest with a smile on his face. "Your Excellency Chen Luo, I will naturally guide you through the treasure house. But before that, I have a small favor here. I wonder if you can help me?" As soon as these words came out, the room instantly became silent. Chapter 334, Part 1. After a moment of silence, Chen Luo's face moved slightly. He looked at the other party with a half-smile and said, "Why? Can I understand that you don't intend to abide by the agreement now?" "Definitely not." Loki still had a smile on his face. His tone was unhurried, and he seemed to have a sense of confidence that he had everything under control. Song, but I seem to have forgotten something just now. To open Odin's treasure house, you still need a unique spell. And I don't know this spell yet, so if I want to take away the treasure, I can only do it by asking my father. But my father's current state is a bit special, so I can't rush to disturb him. Speaking of this, Loki's eyes flickered and he stared straight at Chen Luo in front of him, his tone incomprehensible. But if Mr. Chen Luo is willing to help me with this small favor, I would be willing to go there for you. What do you think of this proposal? Hearing Loki's words, Chen Luo's face was calm, but at this moment, he felt a little colder in his heart. Although I don't know whether what the other party said is true or not, and whether any spells are really needed to open Odin's treasure house, it is no longer important. Since the other party dares to lie to him, he doesn't intend to be polite to him anymore. Even if he is in the other party's 040 territory now, he will make him pay the price. The thoughts in his mind disappeared in a flash. Chen Luo's eyes flashed coldly, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and he asked, "Can I hear what you want me to do for you?" "Definitely." Hearing this, Loki's eyes lit up slightly, thinking that Chen Luo had agreed to his proposal, and said quickly, "Actually, this shouldn't be a big problem for you. You may not know it, but we have had a little trouble in Asgard recently." After listening to Loki's narration, Chen Luo finally understood what the other party was planning. According to Loki, Asgard has been harassed by the giants of Jotunheim recently. Because Thor is now exiled and he has just become the manager of Asgard, he still has a lot of things to deal with, so he can't spare time for the time being. Use human hands to deal with these giants. In addition, now that he has taken the position, a large number of people in Asgard are dissatisfied with him becoming the manager of Asgard, and naturally they are not willing to contribute more, so he can only ask Chen Luo to help handle it on his behalf. And according to him, the strength of those giants of Jotunheim is only at the extraordinary level. It may be difficult for others, but for Chen Luo, who is a demigod, it is not a problem at all. If he just had to deal with some giants with extraordinary strength, it would not be a difficult task for Chen Luo, but when he made this request, Loki had his own ideas in mind. Although it is not difficult to kill these giants of Jotunheim, don't forget that there are people standing behind these giants of Jotunheim. But the king of giants of Jotunheim, whose strength has reached the peak level of a demigod. Once the other party knows that one of his tribesmen died at the hands of Chen Luo, he will definitely seek revenge on Chen Luo. With Lao's strength, he doesn't believe that Chen Luo will survive. Definitely, the reason why he did this was not to kill Chen Luo, but to save Chen Luo in time when he was in crisis. With such a life-saving grace, coupled with his methods, he also don't you believe that you can't take this demigod-level expert under your command? If his plan really succeeds, with Chen Luo's help in the future, his throne will be more secure. As for what he just said about the intrusion of giants of Jotunheim, he was definitely making it up casually, just to provide Chen Luo with a reason to take action. As long as he agrees, he will find a way to get him to Jotunheim, where as long as Chen Luo takes action, everything will fall into place. When the time comes, all he has to do is find the right opportunity to lend a helping hand, and it's enough to save him. As for whether Chen Luo will agree to it, Loki is also very sure. After all, the treasures in the treasure house are indeed very tempting, and secondly, his request is indeed not difficult for Chen Luo. The absolute prerequisite is that the other party does not know the existence of Lao Fi, but this is impossible even if you think about it. Even if Chen Luo is powerful, he is just an earthling who has lived on the earth all his life. How can he know the situation in Jotunheim? It was with this in mind that Lu Ji thought of using such a calendar. However, no matter how perfect his plan was, how could he have imagined that the object of his calculations this time had a soul from another world? Not to mention the situation in Jotunheim, even the development of the future world would not be known to him. It's crystal clear. Therefore, after listening to Loki's words, Chen Luo instantly understood the other party's plan. He sneered in his heart and was about to speak. The next moment, a familiar voice suddenly echoed in my mind. Ding! It has been detected that the host has met the conditions, and new choices are now open. Choice 1. Agree to Loki's conditions, go to Jotunheim, and conquer the giants of Jotunheim, kill Rao. Reward, how to increase blood god power, can be awarded upon selection. Title of Planet Lord. Option 2. Reject Loki's conditions, kill Loki directly, and destroy Asgard, kill Odin. Reward, different space dimension, conqueror title Chen Luo. He also didn't expect that the system would actually show off its presence at this time. Looking at the two options displayed on the panel, Chen Luo sighed silently, ignored the second option, and focused on the first one. On a choice. He has seen the reward of the second choice once before. To be honest, the reward of the different space dimension is indeed worthy of the difficulty of realizing this choice. Once he can really complete it and successfully integrate with this dimension, then he will be able to instantly cross the boundary of the demigod level and reach the level of a true god just like Dormammu once did. But having said that, once he integrates with another dimension, he will no longer be able to stay in this universe for a long time like now, but will have to stay alone in that empty dimension for a long time. Like this life Chen Luo is definitely not willing to accept. Furthermore, the content of the second option is indeed a bit outrageous. Killing Loki is okay, but the destruction of Asgard and the killing of Odin are two things that he may not be able to do with his current strength. So now all he can choose is another option. Chen Luo's eyes moved to the first selection, especially the reward column below. Chen Luo's heart moved, and then he said silently without hesitation, "I choose the first one." As soon as he finished speaking, the system's voice sounded again in the next moment. The host has made a choice, and the rewards are now distributed. The Blood God Power Improvement Method has been distributed. Please check the host. Immediately afterwards, a brand new memory suddenly poured into my mind. Feeling the memory that suddenly appeared in his mind, Chen Luo's face moved slightly, and he was silent for a while, then raised his head and looked in the direction of Loki. "Loki, I agree to your request." Hearing this, Loki's eyes suddenly lit up, and the smile on his face became even wider. Chapter 340, Part 1. Placed where Bifrost is, Chen Luo and Chen Luo have just arrived at Asgard's foothold. In the splendid hall, looking at the activated Bifrost in front of him, Loki's face moved slightly, and he turned around and looked in the direction of Chen Luo. "Your Excellency Chen Luo, you only need to go to the other side through Bifrost, and you will successfully reach your destination." Loki looked serious. "Those giants of Jotunheim are over there. So then, I'll leave it to you. You don't have to be so polite." Chen Luo narrowed his eyes slightly, raised a slight arc on his face, and looked at the other party with a half-smile. "Loki, His Royal Highness the Prince." Chen Luo's gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the soul. Facing Chen Luo's gaze, Loki's smile slowly stiffened, and with a shudder in his heart, he turned his head inexplicably to avoid Chen Luo's gaze. Seeing this, Chen Luo didn't say anything more, smiled slightly, and then walked towards the gorgeous passage ahead. "Heimdall, I'm going to trouble you next." On the high platform behind the two of them, Heimdall held the sword in his hands tightly, and while opening the passage to Jotunheim, he replied, "Don't worry, leave it to me. I will watch over you at any time. As long as you speak, I will activate Bifrost and bring you back." As soon as these words came out, Loki's smile suddenly stiffened. But before he could say anything, Chen Luo jumped up and disappeared in the passage in an instant. The next moment, when the light in front of him dissipated, Chen Luo came back to his senses again, looked around, and suddenly understood that he had now arrived in the legendary ice and snow country, Eli-Hiam. He raised his head and looked at the sky, looking at the thick layer of clouds above and the seemingly endless snowstorm around him slowly falling from the sky. The biting cold wind blew around, bringing with it bursts of chill. I turned my head and looked around. I was surrounded by huge amounts of snow-capped mountains on all sides. As far as I could see, the whole world was covered with a layer of white. Looking down from a high altitude, in this pure white in the world of ice and snow, Chen Luo was the only one standing there, looking extremely lonely. Click. Picking up the camera in his hand, Chen Luo kept pressing the shutter button while looking around. Chen Luo didn't feel any discomfort on his face. Instead, he looked around with interest and exclaimed, "Is this Jotunheim? This scene looks really spectacular. But this world is a bit too monotonous. It would be great if we could take pictures of the giants of Jotunheim." Even in this world of ice and snow, where the temperature reaches dozens of degrees below zero, Chen Luo is only wearing the short-sleeved shirt he came in with, looking casual, with a relaxed face, and no sense of discomfort at all. The moment the cold wind blowing around passed by Chen Luo's body, the divine power in his body began to operate on its own, and integrates energy conversion immediately began to take effect. All forms of energy are absorbed and transformed by his body, and then turned into nutrients for his body to grow. It is precisely because of this that Chen Luo can adapt as quickly as possible no matter what environment he is in. Just like now, even if faced with an environment that would freeze ordinary people into ice sculptures, it has no impact on Chen Luo. While looking at the surrounding environment, Chen Luo's bloody divine power appeared under his feet, dragging his body to float in the air and fly quickly in a certain direction. According to the information given by Loki, the gathering place of the giants of Jotunheim he mentioned is exactly at the front of the direction chosen by Chen Luo, in this dim world, the place that is faintly glowing. Similarly, that is where the royal palace of the giants of Jotunheim is located, which Thor, Loki, and others visited before. The king of the Frost clan also lives in that palace. Definitely, Loki just didn't tell Chen Luo all this. But this has no impact on Chen Luo. After making the choice before, Chen Luo understood that Lauf was the existence he had to face this time. If he wants to get the title reward later, then killing the king of the Frost clan is what he must complete. Although he still doesn't know what this title does, judging from the things the system has rewarded before, Chen Luo doesn't think this thing is just a decoration. Moreover, in addition to this reward, Chen Luo also had a reason to take action after getting information on how to improve his divine power. According to the memory given to him by the system, the method to improve his divine power is also very simple. Kill. Only by sacrificing enough lives will his divine power be further increased. And the stronger the life force that dies in his hands, the more beneficial it is to the growth of divine power. Asking for flowers. In other words, although killing ordinary people with little strength can also enhance divine power, the effect is definitely not as good as killing those powerful life forms. Using the calculation method provided by the system, the effect of killing a surface-level life form is hundreds or thousands of times greater than that of ordinary people. If you kill an extraordinary life form, the effect will be much stronger than the surface level, and it will be thousands of times more powerful than killing ordinary people. As for the increase that can be achieved by killing one demigod, it is undoubtedly more exaggerated. Based on systematic calculations, if he can kill 100 demigods, then his divine power will be able to grow to the peak level of demigods. It has to be said that this method of increasing one's divine power by killing lives is worthy of the name blood god power. Therefore, in order to rapidly increase his divine power, extraordinary races like the giants of Jotunheim are undoubtedly Chen Luo's best hunting targets. If he could kill all the giants of Jotunheim on this planet, how far could his divine power be increased? Thinking of such a scene, Chen Luo couldn't help but feel a sense of expectation. It was for this reason that Chen Luo chose to agree to Loki's request. Otherwise, how could he agree to something like this that would be of no benefit? But this doesn't mean that he will let Loki go. If the other party dares to scheme against him like this, then he has to pay the corresponding price. But all this can only be said after he gets out of here. While thinking about this, Chen Luo's speed continued unabated, drawing a long afterimage in the sky, approaching the light ahead at a terrifying speed that broke the sound barrier. About half an hour later, when Chen Luo stopped again, in front of him, 10 huge palaces covered with ice quietly appeared in front of him in front of a snow mountain with a height of several thousand meters. Here it is. Looking at the palace in front of him, Chen Luo's expression changed. He had just thought of something. The next moment, on the mountainside of a snow mountain behind him, a sound of piercing the sky sounded, and it instantly struck in the direction of Chen Luo. Chapter 341, Part 1. At the moment when Chen Luo arrived at the palace, there was a snow-capped mountain not far behind him. The giants of Jotunheim, who have blue skin and a tall and muscular body, and look to be about 3 meters tall, quietly climbed up from the ice and snow, took off the long bow hanging on their shoulders, and pulled hard, and the bow string was instantly tightened. At the same time, an inexplicable force surged out of his body and gathered in his hand. Then, a long arrow supported by ice slowly formed. It was placed on the bowstring in his hand. He let go of his right hand. The next moment, the arrow of ice and snow disappeared from the place, broke the air in front of him, and shot behind Chen Luo with a roar. Go! Boom! With the blessing of divine power, the long arrow seemed to turn into a long ice and snow dragon, instantly shattering the space in front of it and appearing behind Chen Luo as if teleporting. There was no time to react. Under the sneak attack of 547, by this strong man who had already reached the level of a demigod, Chen Luo's chest was instantly opened with a big hole. The blood hole in his chest didn't even have time to heal, and was surrounded by continuous wounds. The incoming wind and snow covered it, and then formed a thick layer of ice, which looked very weird. The reason why the energy conversion ability did not play a defensive role was actually something he had already discovered when fighting Mephisto. After all, although this ability can absorb various forms of energy existing in nature, unfortunately, divine power does not fall into this category. Every birth of a powerful demigod has its divine power created from scratch. In the face of this kind of energy that did not exist before in the universe, his ability cannot play a role in absorbing and transforming it. In other words, this ability is insurmountable when faced with opponents below the level of a demigod, but when faced with a strong person above the level of a demigod, its effect is dispensable. Lowering his head and looking at the blood hole covered with ice and snow that appeared on his chest, Chen Luo looked calm and said nothing, and his body was slightly shaken. The ice and snow fell, and the moment the ice and snow were shattered, Chen Luo's body began to regenerate at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the blood hole in his chest returned to its original shape in just a few breaths. Slowly turning around and looking at the obviously surprised figure behind him, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with cold light, and with a thought in his mind, he disappeared in an instant. The next moment, when Chen Luo reappeared, he was already behind the opponent. He swung out his right fist instantly, bringing up an afterimage in the air and hitting the opponent's chest. If it were anyone else, they would most likely be unable to resist this sudden move. However, Chen Luo's opponent at this moment is also a being at the demigod level. Facing Chen Luo's attack, he would have been able to resist it for a long time. Being alert, he instantly noticed the strange movement behind him. Without thinking, he subconsciously turned sideways, barely avoiding the vital point. But even if he dodged in time and was not struck through the chest by Chen Luo, facing Chen Luo's fist that was several times faster than the speed of sound, it was still difficult to completely dodge. Just as he turned sideways, Chen Luo the punch also happened to hit his left arm. Click. A terrifying power erupted, followed by a crisp sound. In front of Chen Luo, the giants of Jotunheim let out a low roar of pain, and its left arm dropped weakly. I no longer have the energy to lift it up. Obviously, although the opponent is a demigod, he does not have the same super speed regeneration ability as Chen Luo. Although an injury like a broken left arm will be intact in a few days, the left arm is obviously no longer able to provide him with help. He quickly turned around and looked at Chen Luo in front of him. Killing intent bloomed in the eyes of this giants of Jotunheim. The ice blue eyes instantly turned to red, and the cold pure white light on his body continued to flow. He casually threw the longbow in his hand low. Now that his left arm was interrupted by Chen Luo, this weapon was obviously no longer useful. Pure white light continued to pour into the palm of his right hand, and gradually, a wide ice blade that was only a few meters long grew out at a speed visible to the naked eye, and was held in the palm of his hand. The red eyes flashed fiercely, and without saying a word, the other party moved his feet and stepped hard on the ground. Huge amounts of power exploded, and countless gravel wrapped in ice exploded. Immediately afterwards, the rock wall under the two of them also exploded. They were shattered one after another under the opponent's power, and began to collapse. However, such movement did not affect the opponent at all. The giants of Jotunheim was still staring in the direction of Chen Luo, striding out, waving the huge ice blade in his hand, and slashing down at Chen Luo. Seeing the opponent's attack, Chen Luo's mouth curved slightly. If you want a head-on confrontation, fine, as you wish. As soon as he finished speaking, behind Chen Luo, the wide batwing stretched out instantly. With the blessing of the two abilities of bat transformation and darkness, Chen Luo's body strength surged, already several times more than before. The muscles all over his body were tense. At this moment, Chen Luo's fist was wrapped in a red color. He looked at the ice blade that was about to come, and then he raised his fist and hit Maichi without hesitation. Boom. The moment the fists and blades intersected, the two divine powers attached to them entangled and offset each other. Without the blessing of the divine power, the giants of Jotunheim, which was already several times weaker than Chen Luo in terms of power, was suddenly unable to resist, and the ice blade instantly he was blown into pieces by Chen Luo's fist, and then he hit the opponent's door with unabated force. Along with a roar of huge amounts, the giant was instantly knocked hundreds of meters away by Chen Luo, and then his entire body sank into another mountain not far away. At the moment when the rock wall collapsed under their feet, Chen Luo moved his feet, crushing the ice-covered and iron-hard rocks under his feet. His body rushed out like a cannonball, away from the snow-capped mountain, and then rushed towards the place where the former disappeared. Become a resource on my growth path. Chen Luo's cold voice sounded, and his wings spread out behind him, with blood wrapped around them, dragging two long blood marks in the air, and then he slammed into the mountain in the distance. At the moment when it was about to come into contact with the mountain, the blood light between Chen Luo's wings surged, expanding thousands of times in an instant, forming a huge amount of blood-colored blade, and following Chen Luo's movements, it slashed straight towards the mountain. With the blessing of Chen Luo's divine power, the blood blade was attracted by Chen Luo's movements and instantly sank into the mountain in front of him with him. Although this blood blade is not an entity, after integrating Chen Luo's various ability characteristics under Chen Luo's control, it seems to have turned into an indestructible blood 2.0 color artifact. The moment it sank into the mountain, the blood blade cut through the thick ice in front of him. When Chen Luo appeared from the other side of the mountain again, the blood blade also cut through the mountain. Rumble. As the blood light dissipated, the next moment, behind Chen Luo, Yamamoto rumbled. From the mountainside, countless thick ice and snow rocks fell rustlingly. With snowflakes flying all over the sky, the mountainside began to slowly tilt toward the other side from the top of the mountain, and then crashed heavily into the ground. The ground began to tremble violently, and as half of the mountain fell to the ground, the thick ice layer that never melted all year round on the surface of the ground instantly shattered and collapsed. Countless huge amounts of cracks spread outward from the center of the snow mountain, and then in Chen Luo under the slightly surprised gaze, the crack extended straight towards the palace in front. Chapter 341, Part 2. Who is it? Chapter 342, Part 1. Just when the crack was about to really touch the palace, the next moment, a crystal-clear ice-blue light poured out from inside the palace, and then began to spread rapidly to the surroundings. As the light began to spread, wherever the light passed, the originally dense cracks suddenly stopped spreading, and then began to slowly repair under an inexplicable force. Finally, in just a short period of time, the ground within a radius of dozens of miles of the palace returned to its original appearance again. The cracks healed one after another, and no trace of the original trace could be seen anymore. Thousands of meters away from the palace, Chen Luo was floating quietly in the sky, staring straight ahead, feeling the momentum slowly rising from the depths of the palace, and his face gradually became heavier. Although this momentum is still quite different from when he faced Mephisto, except for Mephisto, among all the strong men Chen Luo has encountered, no one can compare with him. Even he is the same now. After silently making a comparison, Chen Luo suddenly had a vague guess in his heart. This kind of momentum is obviously not something that ordinary demigods can possess. Just compare the 11 demigods of the giants of Jotunheim clan that Chen Luo just solved. The gap in momentum between the two is even greater, nearly 100 times bigger. Although he can now deal with demigods who are at an average level of strength, if he were to face a strong man like this who is likely to reach the peak level of demigods, he would obviously still be a bit weak now. It seems that we can only solve it after we become stronger. After silently taking a look at the palace in front of him, Chen Luo suddenly made a decision. With a thought in his mind, the next moment, Chen Luo instantly activated his teleportation ability and disappeared from where he was. When he appeared again, he was already thousands of miles away from the palace. Raising his head, Chen Luo shouted loudly, "Heimdall, turn on Bifrost." The next moment, a brilliant beam of light fell from the sky above Chen Luo's head, shrouding it in the direction of Chen Luo. Don't even think about leaving. However, at this moment, a deep roar as cold as ice instantly traveled thousands of miles away and fell into Chen Luo's ears. Hearing this voice, Chen Luo's expression suddenly changed. "Are you chasing me? How is that possible?" Subconsciously, he looked towards the source of the sound. Whoosh! Before Chen Luo could react, the next moment, an afterimage instantly cut through the air in front of him, piercing Chen Luo's chest in an instant, and then sank heavily into the snow-capped mountain minister a few meters behind Chen Luo. Boom! Along with a deafening loud noise, the snow mountain instantly began to collapse and shatter, and then slowly disappeared from Chen Luo's field of vision. And at the moment when the snow mountain completely disappeared, the light beam above Chen Luo also fell down, covering Chen Luo. When the light dissipated, Chen Luo also disappeared. Just half an hour after Chen Luo disappeared, a giant with ice-blue light wrapped around its body instantly broke through the thick ice on the ground and came to the place where Chen Luo disappeared. With a wave of his hand, he blew away the accumulated layer of ice and snow under his feet. Looking at the huge amounts of circular brand below and the lines engraved in the circle, Lauf's face was gloomy, and his scarlet eyes were filled with murderous intent. Asgard! He slowly raised his head and looked at the sky above his head. Accompanied by an angry roar, the next moment, the terrifying momentum unique to the peak of demigods spread outward crazily, cover the entire planet. At this moment, on this ice and snow continent called Jotunheim, all the life forms of the Frost clan seemed to feel a heavy and terrifying pressure, as if they were carrying a mountain on their backs, and it was extremely difficult to even move a single step. Involuntarily kneeling on the ground, lowering their heads, everyone stared at something with horrified faces. Their bodies began to tremble slightly, and their hearts were full of fear. After a long time, this terrifying pressure slowly dissipated. Looking up at the sky, Lauf's eyes flashed coldly, and his heart boiled with murderous intent. The moment he woke up, Lauf had already discovered that one of his tribesmen who had reached the level of a demigod had lost his life breath. In anger, his divine power instantly spread to the entire planet for exploration. After finding out that Chen Luo, a man with a completely different lifestyle from them, Lauf instantly understood the whole story and chose to take action without any hesitation. In a rage, at that moment Lauf had already used all his strength. A blow passed through the chest. Even though Chen Luo has been picked up by Bifrost, in Lauf's view, Chen Luo at the moment was already on the verge of death. With such a demigod being buried with his people, Lauf only then he barely suppressed the anger in his heart. But even so, I was still extremely angry at Asgard's violation of the agreement again. If it weren't for the fact that the casket of ancient winters, the treasure passed down from generation to generation by their giants of Jotunheim clan, is still in Odin's treasure house. With the help of this artifact, if Asgard dares to provoke Jin like this, I'm afraid that he will be killed the next day. Dare you lead your tribe to fight with them? Judging from the state Odin was in when he saw him before, if he had the artifact in hand, no one in Asgard would be able to stop him. Casket of ancient winters. A low voice sounded in the snow. Lauf's eyes flickered for a moment, then he slowly withdrew his gaze and turned towards the palace. Odin, sooner or later, I will take off your head with my own hands. At the same time, 457 is on the other side. After successfully escaping from Jotunheim and returning to Asgard on the Bifrost, Chen Luo finally came to his senses and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Recalling the attack he had just endured, Chen Luo couldn't help but shuddered, and a trace of solemnity flashed in his eyes. Although it was only a short meeting, Chen Luo already understood the terrifying strength of the king of giants of Jotunheim. With his current strength, the opponent, like Mephisto, was completely unable to compete with him. Maybe with his Superman-level regeneration ability, he can deal with it for a while, but after a long time, his divine power is exhausted, and when the regeneration ability weakens or even disappears, that is when he will fall. Maybe only after he further improves the divine power in his body and reaches the peak level of demigod can he have the possibility of fighting against his opponent. Now because he is not strong enough, even if he wants to get rewards from the system, he has to wait for a while. While Chen Luo was thinking secretly, behind him, Loki walked in quietly, looking at the huge blood hole in Chen Luo's chest, and then at Chen Luo's calm face at this moment. His brows jumped slightly. He smiled with a stiff face and said, "Your Excellency Chen Luo, are you okay?" As soon as these words came out, Chen Luo suddenly woke up from his meditation. Chapter 343, Part 1. Slowly turning his head, facing Loki's stiff smiling face, Chen Luo slowly raised the corners of his mouth, half smiling but not smiling. "Why? Can I come back from there? Have I disappointed His Highness?" As he spoke, the flesh and blood on Chen Luo's chest began to squirm rapidly, and countless granules began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. With Chen Luo's strong recovery power, it only took a few breaths to fully recover as before. Seeing this scene, Loki's pupil shrank subconsciously and his heart was shocked. This monster! Cursing secretly in his heart, after seeing Chen Luo's monster-like recovery ability, Loki already knew in his heart that he still underestimated Chen Luo's strength. With such recovery ability, even if he is lacking in strength, he is still the most difficult to deal with. What's more, Chen Luo's strength is much stronger than him. The combination of the two also makes him more difficult to deal with. From Loki's point of view, although Chen Luo and his stupid brother have not yet fought against each other, even if they are inferior to Thor, with such recovery ability, as the stalemate between the two lasts for a long time, the balance of final victory will gradually offset towards the former. Just like now, he originally thought that after Chen Luo went to Jotunheim, facing an opponent like Lauf, he would have to ask for help from himself in the end, but he did not expect that the opponent would be able to escape unscathed in the end. Even if he suffered such a serious injury, it would have no impact on Chen Luo. This was the first time Loki had seen such an exaggerated survival ability. There is no doubt that in the face of such a monster-level recovery ability, all his previous ideas have become empty talk. Now he even suspects that if without the help of Bifrost, Chen Luo had been kept in Jotunheim, and as time passed and the two of them continued to fight, Lauf might have been consumed by Chen Luo in the end. Thinking of this, Loki's heart suddenly trembled, and he became even more afraid of Chen Luo. With a dry laugh, Loki quickly said, "How could it be possible? In fact, I had planned to go to Jotunheim to support you just now, but now it seems that it is a bit late." "Really?" Chen Luo chuckled, did not continue on this issue, and quickly changed the topic. "Then, Your Highness, it's time for you to fulfill your promise. Odin's treasure house, can I enter?" Facing Chen Luo's gaze, Loki's eyes flashed slightly. The smile on his face gradually softened, and he regained his composure. "Sir Chen Luo, if I remember correctly, it only took you less than an hour to go to Jotunheim just now, right? In such a short time, haven't you already found the giants of Jotunheim who invaded Asgard? If we don't find it, the agreement between us will not be considered completed." Hearing this, Chen Luo smiled slightly and said, "I didn't find those giants of Jotunheim you mentioned. But, if I use a demigod-level giants of Jotunheim in exchange, this should be enough, right?" "Demigod?" Loki's eyes shrank and he frowned subconsciously. "Could it be that you?" Chen Luo shrugged and turned to look at Heimdall. "Heimdall, now I might have to trouble you to be a witness." Not far behind the two of them, Heimdall, who had been standing like a statue, finally made a move. Slowly turning his head to look at the two of them, Heimdall nodded slightly and said steadily, "A demigod-level giants of Jotunheim did fall just now." As he said this, Heimdall also had a new understanding of Chen Luo's strength. You must know that Chen Luo has been less than a month away from becoming a demigod. In such a short period of time, he can grow to the point where he can kill fellow demigods, which is beyond his expectations. He had watched the whole battle between Chen Luo and the giants of Jotunheim just now. The whole process only took a few minutes. Such a strong man who had entered the demigod level for hundreds of years was like this. Fall into the opponent's hands. Even a veteran demigod like him would not dare to underestimate such fighting power. Especially after seeing the terrifying recovery ability that Chen Luo showed just now. Even he himself may not be sure of victory when facing Chen Luo. And this is just when the other party has just become a demigod. If he is given another period of time to grow, he cannot even imagine how far the other party can grow in the future. Maybe even becoming a true god is not impossible. Naturally, Heimdall would not want to offend Chen Luo, who had such terrifying potential. Even when he heard that the other party wanted to go to Odin's treasure house, he did not want to stop him. On the contrary, if he could use this matter to communicate with Chen Luo, being friends with Luo is not a bad thing for Asgard. On the other side, after hearing Heimdall's affirmative answer, Loki's face changed slightly and he took a deep look at Chen Luo. His thoughts were spinning in his mind. After a while, he finally nodded slightly. "I didn't expect Mr. Chen Luo to be able to do this." Since there is a demigod-level giants of Jotunheim as a replacement, there is no problem on my side. You can choose any of the treasures in Odin's treasure house. With a smile on his face again, Loki invited. But having said that, you can help us kill a demigod from the giants of Jotunheim, and we Asgard should also express our gratitude. If you are not busy, just let me entertain you. Let us hold a grand banquet for you. After the banquet is over, it will not be too late for us to go to the treasure house. Seeing the smile on the other party's face, Chen Luo shook his head slightly and declined. I think it's better to go to the treasure house first. As for the banquet, there's no need for it. My family is still waiting for me to go back. As soon as I get what I want, I'll leave here. Is that so? Loki's smile faltered, and he nodded slightly without saying anything more. He turned around and said, Then come with me. After a while, Loki took Chen Luo to a gate deep underground in the palace. At this moment, Loki was holding the Spear of Eternity left by Odin in his hand and gently tapped the ground. The next moment, a dazzling golden light shone, and then, the door in front of him slowly opened to both sides. This is it. Looking inside the door, Loki's eyes flashed slightly, and then he stepped forward. Come with me. The two passed through the gate and came inside Ballion. Looking around, I saw that in this huge amount of secret room, there were dozens of stone platforms arranged on both sides. Above each stone platform, there were pieces of different shapes, with divine power faintly flowing on them. The treasures, even if these treasures are in an ownerless state at the moment, they still give people a powerful power. Under the influence of such power, ordinary mortals cannot get close at all, and only strong men like Chen Luo who have reached the level of demigods can be qualified to use these artifacts. Looking at the artifacts exuding powerful power on the stone platforms around him, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he felt a little excited for a moment. Chapter 344, Part 1. Walking forward quickly, Chen Luo soon came to a stone platform with a brazier and stood in front of it. Looking up, he saw a handful of blazing flames appearing in front of his eyes in the brazier. Even though no fuel was found under the flame, it had no effect on it at all. The crimson flame illuminated the surroundings, as if it were eternal. Even if he was just standing in front of it, Chen Luo could feel it. An endless vitality. The eternal fire. The moment he saw the flame, Chen Luo instantly knew its name. In the near future, it is under the influence of this flame that Surti, the flame giant that exists in Muspelheim, one of the 9 realms, is able to regain his peak combat power, holding the flame giant sword, thus bringing the final end to Asgard. This is where Twilight of the Gods comes from. In addition to being able to resurrect Surti, the eternal fire was also used by Hela after breaking the seal to reawaken the warriors who had followed her in battle, giving them new vitality. Although I have not personally experienced it, according to the information Chen Luo knows, after possessing the eternal fire, it is likely that you will have the ability to resurrect people. Definitely, given that those people under Hela's command died with only the appearance of skeletons, it is difficult to say whether they were truly resurrected or were manipulated to wake up. Therefore, as to whether the eternal fire really has the ability to resurrect people, it's just Chen Luo's guess. But even so, judging from the fact that it can give Surti the power to destroy Asgard, the eternal fire still has incredible abilities. After looking deeply at the flame for a moment, Chen Luo stepped forward again and walked forward. Not long after, when Chen Luo stopped again, he looked at the thing placed on the stone platform in front of him. Even if no one moved it, there would be white mist escaping from time to time around the artifact. Just looking from a distance, going up there can give people a bit of coolness. He stretched out his hand to make contact with it. The next moment, a biting coldness hit him. Chen Luo couldn't help but frown when he felt the coldness coming from his fingertips. Withdrawing his fingers, Chen Luo seemed to have thought of something. He turned his head and looked at Loki, who was also walking forward. The corner of his mouth raised a slight arc. Loki, what is the name of this treasure? Casket of Ancient Winters. Loki quickly replied, This is a treasure passed down from generation to generation by the giants of Jotunheim. When they fought with us, they were defeated by the god King Odin. So this artifact fell into our hands. It is said that after mastering this artifact, you can have BBFJ, the ability to control ice. After a pause, Loki then continued, However, this artifact can only be exerted to its maximum power by those who also have ice-type divine power, or are of the bloodline of giants of Jotunheim. If I remember correctly, your divine power attributes should not meet this requirement. So if you want to activate this artifact, I'm afraid the power won't satisfy you. Listening to the other party's explanation, Chen Luo nodded slightly to express his understanding. In this case, this thing is not suitable for me. As he said that, Chen Luo turned his head and looked at Loki with a slightly strange look. But since this artifact is a treasure of the giants of Jotunheim, its power is quite impressive. If you can find a way to make it exert its full power, it would be a good thing for Asgard. This way, even if Jotunheim makes another move in the future, you will have more power to resist it. Seeing Loki's pensive look, Chen Luo's face moved slightly and he spoke again. And you don't seem to have any magic weapon to use now, otherwise you can give it a try. Maybe you can unleash the full power of this artifact? Hearing this, Loki's face froze and he laughed and said, "How is this possible? Your Excellency, please stop joking." "Yeah." Chen Luo shrugged, turned around and walked to the other side without saying anything more. Just as Loki was about to follow him, he suddenly paused and subconsciously glanced to one side from the corner of his eye, looking at the casket of ancient winters placed on the stone platform next to him. His eyes flickered for a moment and then returned to their original state again. Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo came to another stone platform and stopped, looking at the item placed on it. His eyes flashed slightly, and he thought to himself, "Finally found." What was placed in front of Chen Luo was a huge golden glove with numerous lines on it. This glove seems to be worn by the right hand. There are 6 grooves of different file sizes on the back of the glove, as if they were prepared for inlaying something. The inside is empty and stands quietly in place. Although this glove looked a bit ordinary, Chen Luo could still feel a deep power surging from it. And this glove is the purpose of Chen Luo's trip. Infinity Gauntlet. Although in its current state, the power that this artifact can exert is limited, and it may even only have the defensive power of the artifact. But relying on its ability to carry the 6 infinite gems that exist in the universe, the ability of this artifact far exceeds all the artifacts Chen Luo has ever seen. Space, time, soul, power, mind, reality. These 6 gems are said to be born with the Big Bang. Each one has abilities that ordinary people can't imagine. Once the 6 gems are gathered together, what can they do? The power is even more infinite. Just like the purple sweet potato spirit now, his current goal is to collect all 6 infinite gems in his hands. With the power of these 6 gems, he can forcibly erase half of the life in the universe. Such power has far exceeded Chen Luo's imagination. In Chen Luo's view, if these 6 gems were gathered together, the upper limit of the power they could exert would probably exceed the level of gods. With such terrifying power, Chen Luo definitely wants to have it in his hands. But at the same time, he also knew very well that with his current strength, if he directly came into contact with the 6 infinite gems, he would probably not be able to withstand the power brought by the gems. So the best way, just find a carrier for these 6 gems that can carry their power. Just like the infinite glove in front of him, as long as the gem is embedded in it and the glove is used as a buffer, he can indirectly use the ability of the gem. Similarly, if he could collect the gems first, Thanos would be unable to achieve his population reproductive plan after being unable to collect all the infinite gems. And with his current strength, the chance of winning against Thanos is undoubtedly slim. You must know that the opponent is a god-level strongman who can fight Odin at his peak. If you want to defeat such an opponent, you must strengthen yourself as much as possible. Only the strength will do. Regarding the battle in the future, Chen Luo knew very well that once they failed, facing the half probability of death, Chen Luo did not dare to say that he would definitely survive. Therefore, victory is their only option. Looking at the huge amounts of gloves in front of him, Chen Luo said solemnly, "I have chosen. I want this." Chapter 345, Part 1. It's the familiar Bifrost Hall again. Chen Luo turned his head, looked at Heimdall behind him, and said with a smile, "Heimdall, I would like to trouble you to open Bifrost once and send me back." Hearing this, Heimdall nodded slightly and said, "Your Excellency Chen Luo, are you going back so soon? Are you not going to stay for a few more days? There may be nothing we can do now." Chen Luo smiled and said, "Let's talk about it next time when we have a chance. By then, I might bring my family to see it, maybe? Then it's settled." A smile appeared on Heimdall's face. "Next time you want to come over, just call my name. Bifrost will be open for you at any time." Hearing this, Chen Luo's heart moved and he nodded with a smile. "I see." After exchanging pleasantries, Chen Luo came to the passage and said softly, "Well, goodbye." After saying that, the next moment, a brilliant light instantly enveloped Chen Luo. When the light dissipated, Chen Luo also disappeared. In the palace hall, Loki stood at the top, looking at the brilliant light that gradually dissipated in the distance. His eyes flickered, and he didn't know what he thought of, and turned and left the hall. Just before Chen Luo left Asgard. On the other side, Earth. At this moment, half a month has passed since Chen Luo left. Even though Chen Luo only stayed in Asgard for less than a few hours, he has already spent quite some time on the Earth. From this, it can be seen that the relationship between the two there are indeed huge amounts of difference in the flow rate of time. In the past half-month, after being subjected to a wave of psychic attacks by Loki who came from Asgard specially, Thor's will also suddenly sank. He was so shocked that he never had the chance to return to Asgard. Thoughts, but want to spend the rest of my life on Earth. In the first few days, Thor was like a zombie, showing no interest in anything outside. Looking at his depressed look, if he hadn't confirmed Thor's identity from Chen Luo, Phil Coulson would never have thought that this man would be the mythical Thor. After understanding the information they wanted, Phil Coulson no longer thought about taking Thor back to the base when faced with Thor's request. Since the other party wanted to choose a human life, they did not have any difficulties and let Thor go. But due to the special nature of Thor's identity, Phil Coulson still left several agents to stay here and watch his movements, as long as Thor would not do anything harmful to humans in the future. They will never appear in front of each other again. Although they have made such a decision, seeing Thor still looking depressed, Phil Coulson and the others couldn't help but worry secretly. Considering Thor's current situation and the fact that he has lost his divine power, if he is in such a state, if you go down to the human world to survive, you may really encounter danger. If something unexpected happened and the great Thor died at the hands of humans, that would be really ridiculous. But fortunately, Phil Coulson's worry did not last long, because a few days after Thor left, with the intervention of a woman, Thor's life began to gradually change. Jane Foster. This Earthling, who first met Thor when he came to Earth, became interested in him in huge amounts ever since she realized what was different about Thor. Therefore, after learning the news about Thor, we contacted him immediately. If at first she was just curious about Thor's origins and had the idea of researching it, but after she really came into contact with him, Jane suddenly felt an uncontrollable liking for this man. Correspondingly, in the process of getting along with Jane day by day, Thor also developed a different kind of feeling for her. So, quite naturally, the two gradually came together. With Jane's company, Thor gradually came out of his original depression. With the comfort of his girlfriend, he gradually accepted the fact that he had become immortal and planned to live on Earth as a human from now on. However, after living on Earth for nearly half a month, Thor's life changed again with the arrival of another group of people. On this day, in the cloudless sky over this small town in New Mexico, a brilliant beam of light suddenly streaked across the sky and attracted the attention of countless people in an instant. Naturally, this includes Thor, who is working on the farm. Since he decided to live on Earth, Phil Coulson has also provided him with corresponding identification documents to facilitate his normal life on Earth. After losing his divine power, if you want to integrate into the human world, a normal job is also essential. For Thor, a job that uses his brain is obviously not suitable for him, so his best choice is to find some jobs in the human world. Physical work. Please give me flowers. After searching for several days, Thor finally found the target. Because he lived in Asgard as a child, Thor was also very good at raising horses since he was a child. Therefore, with his excellent horse training skills, he was able to successfully find a job on a farm outside the town. What a coincidence is that the place where he works now happens to be not far from the place where the beam of light landed in the sky. Watching the beam of light in the sky gradually dissipate, Thor's expression suddenly became startled. Bifrost? After realizing that someone was coming from Asgard, Thor got on his horse and ran towards the place where the light pillar landed. However, more than 10 minutes later, when Thor saw the four figures appearing in the distance, his eyes widened subconsciously, a look of surprise appeared on his face, and he walked towards them with a big smile. Fandral, Volstagg, Hogan, Sif, why are you here? Hearing this familiar voice, the four of them subconsciously turned their heads and looked towards the source of the sound. The moment they saw Thor, all four of them showed joy on their faces and strode forward to meet him. Thor. Several people gathered together, and after a while of greetings, Volstagg finally remembered the purpose of their coming here this time, and said quickly, Thor, we are here to take you back this time. Come back to Asgard with us, everyone misses you. Yes, Thor. The three people on the side nodded repeatedly, with a flash of expectation in their eyes. Thor, we all think that you are the only person most suitable for the throne of Asgard. I think even His Majesty Odin thinks so. As long as you are willing to admit your mistake to His Majesty, I think His Majesty will agree to your return. Father. After hearing what the four people said, Thor frowned, his face full of doubts. Isn't my father dead? The four warriors of Asgard. As soon as he said this, the four of them looked at him in confusion, with surprise written all over their faces. How is that possible? Thor, where did you hear the news? Your Majesty, he just fell into a deep sleep. How could he die so easily? Huh. Now it was Thor's turn to have question marks hanging over his head. After hearing the four people's answers, he couldn't help but recall the conversation he had with Loki half a month ago. Chapter 346, Part 1. At that time, he was breaking through many obstacles and came to Mjolnir, just when he was filled with joy and thought that he could lift it up again like before, thus regaining his divine power and becoming the famous Thor. However, the next moment, when he officially started to try, reality slapped him hard. No matter how he tried, even with all his strength, he could not move Mjolnir in front of him, let alone be able to use this artifact as freely as before. Only then did he finally recall that before he was exiled by Odin, the other party had cast a spell on this artifact. Now that he had been deprived of his divine power, he was no longer qualified to lift this artifact. He is just an ordinary person now. Realizing this, Thor suddenly became disheartened and gave up resistance completely, and was successfully captured by Phil Coulson. It was during this period that after Chen Luo and Loki finished communicating, Loki came here immediately to say the most farewell since 920 to his brother. Loki, why are you here? The moment he saw Loki, a light suddenly flashed in Thor's eyes and he quickly said, did my father finally change his mind and want me to go back? Thor. Loki stood quietly, with a hint of sadness on his face. I'm just here to see you. Seeing Loki's expression, Thor was stunned for a moment, and a bad premonition suddenly emerged in his heart. What happened? Tell me, is it about Jotunheim? Have they declared war on Asgard? Let me explain to my father that Asgard needs me at this time. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Loki. Thor. Loki looked straight at the other person. The pain in his eyes seemed to be unable to be concealed. Father is dead. As soon as he finished speaking, the room suddenly fell into silence. Thor's eyes widened subconsciously, filled with disbelief. What did you say? The expulsion of you and the threat of renewed war are too much for him to bear. Loki explained, you also know that my father's current body can no longer bear these, so after expelling you, my father already fallen. Speaking of this, Loki's face became even more sad. After a long silence, Tuan spoke again. Thor, you don't have to blame yourself. I know you love him. I also tried to persuade him, but he wouldn't listen. He shook his head slightly. When Thor's attention was completely attracted by the news brought by Loki just now, a strange color flashed in Loki's eyes, and then he said, I know that you can no longer lift Mjolnir, but I still have to put it in front of you. Such a punishment is indeed cruel. Now the burden of the throne falls on my shoulders. After sitting on the throne, I realized how much my father had endured before. Hearing this, Thor's body trembled, and he slowly raised his head, with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Then, can I go home? Facing Thor's expectant gaze, Loki sighed softly, shook his head, and then said, just before I came here, we had reached an armistice agreement with Jotunheim. But the condition of the truce with the other party is to banish you forever. Okay, but isn't there any other way? An anxious look appeared on Thor's face, and he wanted to say something else. However, before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Loki again. My mother won't allow you to go home either. Looking at Thor very apologetically, Loki said in a heavy tone, I'm here to say goodbye this time, brother. I'm very sorry. Staring blankly at Loki's figure in front of him, Thor's eyes gradually became mist-filled, and his face was filled with unconcealable sadness. No, it's me who should be sorry. Loki, thank you for coming to see me. This was the first time Loki had seen Thor so vulnerable. A trace of unbearability flashed through his heart, and he wanted to tell him the truth. However, when he thought about the throne he now owned, Loki finally made up his mind and chose to hide it. Farewell, brother. As soon as he finished speaking, Loki disappeared from the spot the next moment. Recalling the conversation with Loki, Thor was even more confused. And when he told the 4 Sif people these things, they were stunned for a moment, and then compassion appeared on their faces. False. Loki is lying to you. Thor. Volstag's face turned red and he said excitedly, damn it. He just wants to prevent you from going back so that he can secure his throne. Thor, you can't let him succeed. Now come back with us and take the throne back from Loki. Looking at the 4 people with excited expressions, Thor pondered for a while, and then slowly shook his head. Since Loki wants this throne, let him give it to him. Anyway, I am just a mortal now. I can no longer lift Mjolnir again, and I am no longer the Thor you know. Having said this, Thor had a gentle smile on his face, put his arm around Fandrel's shoulders, and said happily, but I can't let you run away in vain. Come on, come with me to my current home. Let me entertain you well. It just so happens that you can meet Jane. Jane? Sif frowned slightly and looked at him with some confusion. Yeah. Thor nodded, as if he had thought of something, and the smile on his face became softer. Jane is the girlfriend I found on Earth. She is very nice, smart, and beautiful. I like her very much. Hearing these words, Sif's face gradually became stiff, and the other 3 people obviously knew Sif's feelings for Thor and looked at each other, feeling a little embarrassed for a moment. Then let's go together. Fortunately, after a while, Sif took the initiative to breathe and finally returned to normal. Everyone, follow me. After reuniting with old friends, Thor was extremely happy now. He walked at the front and enthusiastically introduced his life in the past half-month to the 4 people. He shared with them the trivial things in his life and talked about himself. Favorite food and my current job? Listening to Thor's introduction, several people's faces gradually became shocked. Thor. Hogan, who had always been taciturn, couldn't help but say, you seem to be a completely different person now. Don't you no longer miss those old days? I remember, Thor, you wouldn't discuss this with us before. In the past, there was nothing else except fighting in your eyes. How could there be such a big change now? Facing the doubts of several people, Thor shook his head and sighed softly. I was indeed too impulsive and reckless in the past. If it had been me in 1.9, my father would not have fallen into a deep sleep now, and Asgard would not have been threatened by war because of our city. Now I have understood that sometimes, war is not the only way to solve things. Hearing these words from Thor's mouth, several people looked at each other, and then Fandral shook his head with emotion, looking at Thor with complicated eyes. Thor, if you had understood this earlier, maybe His Majesty would not have exiled you here. In response, Thor smiled lightly and was about to say something. The next moment, a brilliant rainbow suddenly lit up and then crossed across the sky. Seeing the movement from the sky, several people were attracted to their attention. Sif subconsciously said, Bifrost? Is there someone else coming? I don't know. Should we go over and take a look? Thor definitely had no objection to this, so they immediately set off and rushed towards the landing point of the light beam. Chapter 347, Part 1. On the other side, not far from Thor and others, when the light of Bifrost gradually dissipated, Chen Luo slowly opened his eyes in the circular logo engraved with lines. Turning his head and looking around, Chen Luo suddenly understood the familiar scenery around him. Are you here already? Raising his head and looking at the sky, Chen Luo said to himself, I don't know what time it is now, but I only stayed there for a few hours in total, so it shouldn't be too outrageous. After a pause, as if he thought of something, Chen Luo showed a satisfied smile on his face. And even if it takes a little more time, it's still worth it with this thing. As he spoke, Chen Luo lowered his head and looked at the huge amounts of infinity gauntlet in his arms, his eyes flashing with light. But the trouble is, this thing is still a bit too big for me. It would be nice if it could be smaller. Looking at his right hand, Chen Luo suddenly felt distressed on his face. As if she had sensed his thoughts, just when Chen Luo was distressed, the next moment, a familiar notification sound suddenly sounded. Ding! It has been detected that Host 15 has the Infinity Gauntlet, and the Hidden Welfare Service is now enabled. If you find any infinite gems, you can officially bind the Infinity Gauntlet to the host. Hearing this voice, Chen Luo raised his eyebrows, and a trace of surprise flashed through his heart. This is the first time he has heard that such a task will appear in the system. He does not need to make any choices. He only needs to complete the tasks assigned by the system step by step to successfully get the reward. And the difficulty of this task is not very high. At least as far as he knew, there were 2 infinite gems on the Earth. One of the space gems was stored in the Rubik's Cube. 70 years ago during World War II, it fell into the Antarctic Glacier with the then Captain America. It was not until recent years that Fury accidentally found it during an exploration, and not long after, the world's first superhero will be reborn. Another time gem was found by humans thousands of years ago and stored in the Eye of Agamotto for safekeeping. Since then, the time gem has also been controlled by the Sorcerer Supreme. With the power of this artifact, the Sorcerer Supreme has the power to manipulate time. Coupled with its originally god-level strength, it has become one of the gods. It is also the existence of a top powerhouse. Even the God King Odin at his peak was still among the best. Therefore, if he wants to complete the mission and successfully bind the Infinity Gauntlet to himself, it may be difficult to obtain this time gem with his current strength. Apart from the time gem, his only option is the space in Fury's hands. Gem. Looks like I need to find a chance to chat with Fury. Chen Luo's eyes flashed and he was thinking secretly. At the same time, just as Chen Luo lowered his head and thought, Thor and his team were gradually approaching not far away. Arriving dozens of meters away from Chen Luo, seeing the figure standing in the traces left by Bifrost, a trace of confusion flashed across Thor's eyes. Who is he? Sif spoke with some confusion. I don't know. Thor frowned and said, but looking at his outfit, he looks like an Earthling. Earthling? The 4 of them were startled and looked at each other with disbelief in their eyes. Did someone from Earth visit Asgard? How did he get there? How could Heimdall allow Earthlings to go to Asgard? Thor shook his head, smiled, and strode forward. What's the use of talking about this? Can't you just ask in the past and find out? Watching Thor's leaving figure, the 4 of them looked at each other in confusion, without speaking, and then all followed him. Friend. Hearing this voice, Chen Luo turned his head subconsciously, and when he saw the person coming, a strange color flashed in his eyes. Thor. Why did he come here? With a glance from the corner of his eye, when Chen Luo saw the 4 figures behind Thor, Chen Luo's heart skipped a beat, and a hint of realization flashed in his eyes. The moment he saw the 4 people with different shapes behind Thor, he seemed to have thought of something and came to some understanding. If he remembered correctly, these 4 people should be the 4 Asgard warriors under Thor. Now that he sees these 4 people coming to Earth, it seems that the day when Thor regains his divine power is not far away. With these thoughts passing through his mind silently, Chen Luo looked at Thor walking towards this side with a calm expression, raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said, Thor? Huh? You know me? Thor paused and looked at him with some confusion. I don't think I've seen you before, right? Indeed. Chen Luo nodded calmly, moved his eyes to the sky, and said calmly, but I am very familiar with your good brother. Loki? Thor's face froze for a moment, then he quickly reacted and said with some clarity, so, is it because you know Loki that you were invited to Asgard as a guest? Speaking of this, Thor had a big smile on his face, and a trace of nostalgia flashed in his eyes. Then you should have attended our Asgard banquet, right? How was it? Isn't it nice? Just as Thor was enthusiastically introducing the details of the banquet to Chen Luo, behind him, the four Sifs finally came over. You said you knew Loki? Volstag's rough voice sounded, and he looked at Chen Luo with an unkind look on his face, his tone full of disdain. That despicable guy. If Thor hadn't been around, how could he have lost the throne? Onto him? Vorstag. Thor suddenly turned his head, his face more serious than ever. 480. Loki is my brother. I don't want to hear this kind of thing a second time. Although he is now immortal, Thor's body is filled with an inexplicable majesty of a king at this moment. He is not angry, but just watching quietly. Everyone can feel a great pressure from it, and their hearts are united. Cold. Volstag's heart skipped a beat, and he didn't dare to say anything. He lowered his head and said respectfully, yes, I understand. Seeing this, Thor turned around again and looked at Chen Luo with apologetic eyes. I'm so sorry, my friend, for letting you see this. In response, Chen Luo chuckled, shook his head, and waved his hands carelessly. Don't worry about me. Anyway, I have a normal relationship with Loki. The reason for this trip to Asgard is just a fair transaction. You don't need to care too much. Trade? Thor was stunned for a moment. Then his eyes subconsciously looked at the thing in Chen Luo's arms, and he blinked. For some reason, he felt familiar. This? What do you mean? Chen Luo smiled, weighed the gloves in his hands, and said calmly, you should be familiar with this, right? I got this from Odin's treasure house. I paid a lot to get it. Treasure house of Odin? Hearing Chen Luo's words, Thor and others were stunned. Chapter 348, Part 1. So, this is a treasure taken from the treasure house? No wonder it looks familiar. Looking at the gloves in Chen Luo's hand, Thor's eyes flashed with confusion. Thor was definitely very familiar with Odin's treasure trove. He and Loki had often played in it in the past. Definitely, after their father discovered it and punished them severely, the two of them reduced their frequency of going there. After growing up, except for a few days ago, when the giants of Jotunheim invaded, the two of them went to the treasure house again. It was also the 10th time that the two of them went there again after hundreds of years. But this is not surprising. After all, there are only a few things in the treasure house. I went there a lot when I was a child, so naturally I have no desire to go back. It is normal for me to have a vague memory of the treasures in the treasure house after not going there for such a long time. What's more, considering that Thor is usually not very smart, it's a blessing to still have an impression, but there's no need to expect too much. He looked at the gloves in Chen Luo's hand with some surprise. At this time, Fandal on the side seemed to have thought of something. His eyes flashed, he raised his head, looked at Chen Luo and asked, you just said a deal? What kind of deal would it be that would make Loki agree to exchange the treasures in the treasury? With Loki's character, he doesn't seem to be someone who is willing to suffer losses. Or, did you get this glove through other means? As soon as these words came out, except for Thor, the expressions of the other four people all changed. They exchanged glances with each other, and their eyes gradually became serious when they looked at Chen Luo. They already understood what Fandral meant. From their understanding of Loki, they naturally knew that he was completely different from Thor in terms of personality. Compared with Thor's carelessness, Loki was undoubtedly much smarter. With the other party's shrewdness, how could they freely exchange the treasures in the treasure house? What's more, from the human beings on Earth in front of them, they had no idea that the other party had anything that Loki needed. Thinking of this, they suddenly became a little more suspicious of Chen Luo's statement just now. If this glove was not acquired through trade, then most likely, facing the suspicious gazes of several people, the smile on Chen Luo's face gradually softened, and a coldness flashed in his eyes. Looking at the four people behind Thor, Chen Luo said calmly, "What, do you have any opinions?" As he spoke, a fierce aura slowly rose from his body and spread to the surroundings. The four people suddenly suffocated. Looking into Chen Luo's eyes, for some reason, they all felt a chill in their hearts, as if they were being targeted by a ferocious beast that would tear them into pieces in minutes. Feeling this extremely oppressive momentum, several people subconsciously shrank their pupils and their expressions changed. After the brief surprise, they quickly regained their composure. Feeling that the aura they just felt was just their illusion. They couldn't believe that an earthling could have such an aura that far exceeded them. As if to regain his face, Volstag's mind became hot and he subconsciously spoke provocatively. "Then tell us you are an earthling. What do you have that is worthy of Loki trading with you? What does this have to do with you? Chen Luo squinted his eyes slightly, with no emotion or anger on his face. Even if I don't tell you, are you still planning to fight me? You? Volstag's heart surged with anger. His face turned red. He clenched the weapon in his hand and looked at Chen Luo with evil eyes. Volstag. At this time, Thor's voice sounded again. Stop talking. Thor, but he... Volstagg wanted to say more, but was interrupted by Thor waving his hand. If you have any questions, just ask Loki. Looking at the few people, Thor said seriously, you don't have any evidence now, do you? If you slander other people based on just speculation, how can it be considered a letter from Asgard? Upon hearing this, the four people's faces turned pale and they were immediately speechless. Seeing that the four of them finally stopped talking, Thor looked at Chen Luo apologetically. My friend, I'm so sorry. Volstagg and the others did go too far. Hearing Thor's words, Chen Luo didn't say much, but at this moment, he was somewhat impressed by him in his heart. Although I had known that Thor's character would have changed after this period of training on Earth, otherwise he would not have been recognized by Mjolnir again. But after seeing such a change in the other party, I was still a little surprised. This kind of Thor was completely different from the reckless and arrogant Thor he knew. On the contrary, seeing the other party's performance, Chen Luo could vaguely sense the aura of a king from the other party. What a big change. With a sigh in his heart, Chen Luo shook his head, glanced at the four people behind Thor, and gradually calmed down the anger in his heart. Nothing. If nothing happens, I'll leave first. Although Chen Luo gave up the intention of taking action, it was clear that Chen Luo did not want to have any more contact with the guys behind Thor, so he immediately turned around and planned to leave. Thor nodded, looked at Chen Luo's back as he was about to leave, suddenly thought of something, and asked hurriedly, By the way, I don't know your name yet? Chen Luo. Waving his hands casually, Chen Luo didn't say anything more to the other party. With a thought in his mind, he disappeared instantly. Seeing Chen Luo disappear suddenly, Thor and others were stunned. Disappeared? How did he do it? I don't know. Sif on the side shook his head. A flash of light flashed in his eyes. It seems that this Earthling is not as simple as he looks. After seeing Chen Luo's performance, several people were shocked and immediately realized what was unusual about Chen Luo. Recalling the scene just now, they were also a little surprised and confused about Chen Luo's statement just now. Could it be that everything he just said is true? Realizing that they might have mistakenly blamed the other party, for a moment, several people looked at each other with shock on their faces. Okay, don't think so much. Thor came to his senses first and greeted with a smile. Come on, I will take you to my home. Let you see life in the human world. As he said that, Thor pulled a few people and strode towards the direction of his home. At the same time, Wang's Chen Luo also returned home smoothly. After getting to know him, he discovered that nearly half a month had passed since he left. Recalling the time he had spent in Asgard, he silently counted it in his mind. After calculation, Chen Luo found that the time ratio between the two is about 1 to 60. In other words, if 1 day is spent in Asgard, 2 months have passed on the Earth. After understanding this, Chen Luo suddenly felt relieved. Fortunately, I didn't stay there too much. Otherwise, I don't know how much time would have passed when he came back. Simply half a month is not unacceptable to May and Peter, and with Phil Coulson's advance notice, they are also mentally prepared. Therefore, during this period of time, neither May nor Cheen and others showed any signs of failure. Too panicked. About 3 days passed after I returned home. On this day, after seeing off May and Peter as usual, Chen Luo was about to drive to Cheen for a date. Immediately afterwards, another familiar phone ring rang. Chapter 349, Part 1. Picking up the phone and looking at it, a strange color flashed in Chen Luo's eyes. After picking up the phone, the next moment, Phil Coulson's anxious voice came. List. Wait. Chen Luo interrupted. Covering his forehead with a headache, Chen Luo's face was full of helplessness. Don't you have something to ask me for help again? Ahem. Phil Coulson coughed awkwardly. It's really troublesome, Chen. There is indeed some trouble this time, and you also know that there is something wrong with Thor. Oh. Chen Luo's eyes flashed with light, as if he thought of something, and he understood something in his heart. What? Is there someone from Asgard? That's right. On the other end of the phone, Phil Coulson nodded heavily, looked ahead with a solemn face, and hurriedly explained the situation here to Chen Luo. Just an hour ago, after spending 3 days with Thor, Sif and his party saw that Thor was living a good life. Although they were a little unwilling, they also respected Thor's choice, so they planned to say goodbye and leave today. However, just as they were about to leave, a brilliant beam of light fell from the sky instantly. When the light of Bifrost gradually dissipated, then, a cool man about 3 meters tall, with a pure black body and a metallic luster appeared in the town. Even if the metal giant just stood still, the inexplicable aura emanating from it began to spread around, and it only took a few breaths to spread to the entire town. For 17, the moment they felt this breath, an inexplicable panic suddenly emerged in the hearts of everyone in the town, and their hearts were filled with fear. While people in the town were still a little confused, all the animals in the town had already taken action. Smoke and dust billowed and lust filled the sky. All the animals in the town seemed to be frightened and ran away uncontrollably. Under the actions of these animals, the ground shook slightly, as if an earthquake had occurred, which surprised everyone. What's going on? What happened to these animals? I don't know. It looks like I was shocked. It has to be said that in this moment of crisis, the perception of animals is indeed much sharper than that of humans. Just as these animals are fleeing in panic on the other side, the destroyers who came to this small town under Loki's orders are also coming. The action started at the same time. The dark metal mask slowly opened outwards, and the red light inside shone. As time passed, the red light became more and more dazzling under the metal mask. Boom! Finally, when the red light gathered to the limit, it shot out instantly and fell straight into a house next to it. Huge amounts of explosions sounded, accompanied by countless smoke and dust. The next moment, the house was instantly enveloped by a huge amounts of fireball. When the smoke and dust dissipated, the house was instantly razed to the ground. The original building had long since disappeared and was replaced by a huge, dark pit on the ground. Attracted by the huge amounts of explosion, Thor and others' expressions changed, and they all ran towards the direction of the explosion. Soon, when they followed the sound to their destination, looking at the tall figure standing in front of them, Sif's pupils shrank and he subconsciously exclaimed, "Destroyer? It's actually it? But why did the destroyer appear here?" Thor and the others are definitely no strangers to this giant in front of them. That is a famous war weapon in Asgard. When Odin conquered the 9 realms thousands of years ago, this weapon made great achievements in battle and was extremely powerful. Under the control of Odin at that time, this weapon had terrifying power that rivaled that of the gods. Even at that time, it was able to kill all living creatures on an entire planet with its own power. Once this achievement came out, the entire universe was shaken. Everyone was shocked. Even though Odin is now asleep and the power of this weapon cannot be exerted to its maximum, under Loki's control, this instrument is still unmatched by mortals. With just a casual strike, the power of this beam of light faintly exceeds the category of extraordinary, and it has extremely terrifying lethality. Seeing the scene of the destroyer destroying everything in front of them, Thor and the others suddenly felt a little confused. You know, this weapon has always been controlled by Odin. Since Odin stopped the war thousands of years ago, it has been placed in the treasure house to guard the safety of the treasure. In order to mobilize this war weapon, apart from Odin, who has fallen into sleep, only Loki, who has successfully sat on the throne, has this authority. So a few people were just stunned for a moment, and then reacted immediately. It's Loki. Volstagg gritted his teeth and his face turned red with anger. Only he can mobilize the destroyer. Damn it, what does he want to do? Does Loki want to conquer the earth? On one side of the crowd, Fandral narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he thought of something, and his face changed slightly. He subconsciously looked at Thor in front of him and was about to speak. Look, it's coming with us. Suddenly, Sif's expression changed and he spoke. As soon as these words came out, several people's eyes shrank, and they all raised their heads and looked forward. Just as the destroyer was striding towards a few people, Phil Coulson, who happened to arrive in the town at this moment, also quickly discovered something unusual. Hearing a huge explosion not far away, he followed the sound and came over. Arriving not far behind Thor and the others, Phil Coulson's brain suddenly fell into a pumping state as he looked at the tall figure in front of him. Originally, he came here to ask Thor about what happened to the 4 people who appeared next to him, but he didn't expect to see such a scene as soon as he came here. With every step, the mask on the destroyer's head opened, and red lasers shot out in all directions. Along with the flashes of red light, terrifying explosions sounded, and the surrounding houses were instantly plunged into chaos, into a sea of fire. In less than a minute, half of the entire town was destroyed by this terrifying weapon and turned into ruins. Phil Coulson has never seen such terrifying destructive power before. The shock in his eyes flashed away. He looked at Thor and the others in front of him. Thoughts flashed through his mind. Phil Coulson then trotted forward quickly. Thor, what exactly is going on? Seeing Phil Coulson coming over, Thor didn't have any hesitation and immediately told him the information about the destroyer in front of him. Weapons of war? Phil Coulson frowned and asked, how harmful is this weapon? Can any of you stop it? If we let it continue like this town will be completely destroyed. No way. Looking forward without blinking, Thor replied with a solemn expression. Although the destroyer has not reached its peak state, it is not something that mortals can resist. To deal with it, one must reach the level of a demigod. Demigod? What is that? That is enough to destroy an entire planet. Fandral on the side explained, Thor used to have such strength. If his strength is still there, he should be able to fight against the destroyer. But now, although he hasn't finished speaking yet, Phil Coulson already understands what he means. There is no doubt that considering Thor's current situation as a mortal, he has absolutely no chance of winning against such a war weapon. If Thor is like this, let alone the other four. Seeing the solemn faces of Thor and others, Phil Coulson had no choice but to ask Chen Luo for help. After all, Chen Luo is the strongest being he has ever known. Facing this terrifying war weapon, he really can't think of any other choice besides letting Chen Luo help. On the other side, after hearing the news from Phil Coulson, Chen Luo finally confirmed his suspicion. Chapter 350, Part 1. Shaking his head, he was about to refuse. However, the next moment, a familiar voice suddenly sounded. Ding! The arrival of the destroyer has been detected. Now open the option. Choice 1. Defeat the destroyer and help Thor lift Mjolnir again. Reward. Orientation portal. Permanent. Choice 2. Kill Thor. Reward. Mjolnir's authority to recognize the master. Seeing the prompt popping up from the system, Chen Luo narrowed his eyes slightly and his mind turned. After thinking about it, Chen Luo made no other move, but first started to check what this directional portal was. After some understanding of the system, Chen Luo finally understood. The function of this reward is actually very simple. It means that you can set up a portal wherever you have been before, and from now on, you can reach it instantly as long as you want. And there is no limit on the teleportation distance. In other words, no matter it is any corner of this universe, or an alternate dimension attached to this universe, as long as this teleportation gate is set up, you can enter and exit at will in the future. The most important point is that this portal cannot be destroyed by external forces. Even a strong man at the level of a god cannot do it. But similarly, this teleportation gate also has certain flaws. That is, once the teleportation coordinates are set, it cannot be changed a second time. At the same time, the teleportation gate will be fixed at the destination and cannot be moved. This means that the reward from the system can only allow him to set one teleportation destination. If he wants more, he needs to have more teleportation gates. After learning the purpose of this portal, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he made his choice without hesitation. Choose the first one. At this moment, Chen Luo was also a little surprised. After leaving Jotunheim, he was still a little worried about where to find a suitable target if he wanted to improve his divine power in the future. There is no doubt that Lauf will be more wary after he kills a demigod giant of Jotunheim. Even though he is now familiar with Heimdall and can ask him to help, send him to Jotunheim. However, the noise caused by the Bifrost teleportation was too great. Once it arrives, Lauf will inevitably find his traces. Now with Thor and Chen Luo coming to visit twice, Chen Luo is now very suspicious. If the other party finds out that Bifrost is coming, he will probably be killed. There won't be any hesitation and the attack will be launched immediately. Therefore, if Chen Luo wants to continue hunting demigod-level experts to enhance his own divine power, Bifrost is undoubtedly his next choice. If there is a portal, then Chen Luo will be able to come to Jotunheim quietly, and then go directly to hunt other demigod-level giants of Jotunheim while Lauf is not paying attention. Even if he is discovered by the other party, he can return to Earth at any time, and his safety is extremely high. Once he hunts all the demigods of Jotunheim, his divine power will presumably be increased by huge amounts. There is absolutely no way he could refuse such a choice. Definitely, the second reward provided by the system is also very precious. After all, that is the opportunity to become Thor. Once Mjolnir is successfully lifted, even an ordinary person can instantly become a strong man at the demigod level. Such an opportunity can be said to be extremely precious. But this is not the case for Chen Luo. First of all, with his current power, even if he does not need the artifact Mjolnir, his power will not be weaker than Thor, so the temptation of this god is not very big for him. Secondly, Chen Luo's blood god power is not very compatible with Thor's power. Even if obtaining this artifact can increase his strength to a certain extent, the increase will not be very high. Therefore, instead of relying on this external force to strengthen oneself, it is better to find ways to enhance one's own divine power. The power gained in this way belongs to oneself, and there is no need to worry about the risk of being deprived one day. Looks like I have to take a trip. Although he didn't like Thor's four friends, since there was this reward, Chen Luo had no choice but to take action this time. After making the decision, Chen Luo no longer hesitated and agreed immediately. After hanging up the phone, Chen Luo thought and instantly disappeared. While Chen Luo was acting on the other side, Phil Coulson's face flashed with joy. He turned to look at Thor and others aside and said loudly, "Please give me flowers. Don't worry, everyone. I just asked a strong man for help. When he comes here, we will be safe." Ask for help? Are you talking about humans? Beside Phil Coulson, Thor looked forward anxiously, frowning, and said without looking back, "Impossible. You may not know what kind of power the destroyer has. People on Earth cannot be its opponents. After a pause, a trace of determination appeared in Thor's eyes, and he slowly said, "Let me go. If my judgment is correct, the target of the destroyer should be me. Now the only one who can stop it from continuing to destroy may be me." Just when Phil Coulson asked Chen Luo for help, they saw the destroyer walking straight towards Thor. Worried that Thor would be in danger, the four Sifs immediately waved their weapons and attacked him without hesitation. However, with their extraordinary strength, although they may be considered good in the eyes of others, they are completely unable to withstand the destroyer whose strength has reached the level of a demigod. Now, less than a few minutes have passed, and the weapons in the hands of several people have been broken into 2 pieces by the destroyer's attack. Their bodies have also been hit by the red light emitted from the opponent's head, with traces of burnt black marks appearing all over the body, and blood dripping. Looks very miserable. However, this was still the result of the other party not deliberately targeting them. From the beginning to the end, the destroyer's eyes never stayed on the 4 of them, but kept moving in the direction of Thor. Seeing this, Thor seemed to understand something. The sadness in his eyes flashed away, and then was quickly replaced by a touch of determination. Without saying anything more, just as he was about to walk forward to meet his next fate, the next moment, with a sway in the air beside him, 10 figures slowly emerged from the air. "Chen, you are finally here." After seeing the visitor, Phil Coulson could no longer suppress the surprise on his face and spoke. Thor turned his head subconsciously, and when he saw the person coming, his eyes suddenly opened wide. "Is it you? Boo."